Chapter 299. Luaner, if this continues, you won't be able to hold on for long. Just obediently hand over the king weapon. Don't waste your energy. That young man laughed loudly. His expression was indescribably happy, as if the king weapon was already in his bag. Sure, Xiangran, you want my king weapon? Dream on. The young girl's face was gloomy as she angrily shouted. Then she turned her head to look at Jianshan and loudly said, "Stinking rogue, help me deal with them and I'll write off the grudge between us." Hearing that the young girl was actually asking for help, the young man's face immediately sank. His sharp gaze looked at Jianshan and he shouted, "This is a personal grudge between our Shi clan and the Huang clan. Friend, it's best if you don't interfere, or else you'll have to bear the consequences. This is a personal grudge between our two clans. If an outsider dares to interfere, he definitely won't live for more than 3 days." The middle-aged man who was fighting with the young girl in yellow also angrily shouted. This man was wearing a black robe and had a tall and sturdy build. "Unrelated people, back off immediately, or else it will be considered as a provocation to our Shi clan. You will forever be our Shi clan's enemy and be hunted down by our Shi clan." The last middle-aged man with a scar on his face also angrily shouted, threatening Jianshan. Although they had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers, the king weapon was about to be obtained. At this crucial moment, no one wanted any accidents to happen. Once they obtained the king weapon in the young girl's hands, they would no longer have the slightest fear. In the mercenary tournament, no one would be able to threaten them. Obtaining first place would be a sure thing. Standing on the side, Jianshan directly ignored the threats of these people. Seeing that the young girl was being beaten back by the 3 people, his heart was filled with hesitation. He was hesitating whether or not to help the young girl in yellow get through this calamity. Although Jianshan felt somewhat guilty about what had happened in the past, he had also paid a heavy price for it. First, he was seriously injured by the 2 old men and almost lost his life. Then, he was suddenly ambushed by the young girl and shot a powerful arrow at him. Following that, she continuously shot more than 20 arrows at him. All of this had caused Jianshan's heart to be filled with anger. A cry of pain sounded out as the young girl in yellow didn't dodge in time and her arm was cut. Now, the 3 people surrounded her in a triangle formation to prevent her from escaping. Seeing this scene, Jianshan knew that the young girl in yellow couldn't hold on for much longer. After a moment of hesitation, he gritted his teeth and made a decision, and the light wind sword in his hand. "How dare you obstruct our Shi family's business? You must be tired of living." The black-robed middle-aged man shouted. "Little brat, it's not too late for you to back out." The one who spoke was the young man in white robes. He was attacking the young girl in yellow while shouting at Jianshan. His face was gloomy. Clearly he was truly angry. Jianshan ignored him and continued to stab the middle-aged man in black with his light wind sword. The middle-aged man in black's weapon was a machete. He brandished the machete to block Jianshan's attacks, but his speed wasn't as fast as Jianshan's. After exchanging 2 blows, his attack speed couldn't keep up with Jianshan's footsteps. Just as he was about to use up all of his energy, Jianshan's light wind sword pierced through his throat like a bolt of lightning. The sharp tip of the sword pierced through the back of his throat, causing a drop of blood to drip down. The middle-aged man in black's eyes were wide open. He couldn't believe that the young man in front of him was so strong. His speed was so fast that he didn't even have time to react. Third brother. Seeing the black-robed middle-aged man die, the other man with a scar on his face, who was fighting with the yellow-clothed woman, was so angry that his eyes were about to split open. His eyes were instantly filled with blood. The face of a young man in his 30s also changed greatly. He didn't think that Jianshan, who was younger than him, would be able to deal with an Earth Saint Master so quickly. This kind of strength caused the young man to feel a chill in his heart. "Friend, why do you want to incur the enmity of our Shi clan? Have you forgotten how this woman tried to deal with you? Why don't we work together? Once we deal with her, our Shi clan will definitely reward you greatly." The young man in his 30s said to Jianshan, "Don't believe their nonsense. The Shi clan has always been despicable and shameless. They always go back on their words. Moreover, you have already killed a member of the Shi clan. The Sure clan will definitely not let you go. The young girl in yellow was afraid that Jianshun would turn around and help them, so she hurriedly said. Jianshun's face was indifferent. His expression didn't change in the slightest, as if he didn't hear what the two were saying. He slowly pulled out the light wind sword from the neck of the black-clothed man, and then continued to rush towards the other middle-aged man, who was fighting with the young girl in yellow. The light wind sword turned into a series of afterimages as it pierced towards the middle-aged man. You're courting death. Seeing this, the young man flew into a rage. His face was filled with killing intent. When had he ever invited someone with such kind words? He never thought that the other party would actually ignore him. This made him feel like he had lost face. The anger in his heart grew even stronger and finally turned into killing intent. Jinshin's light wind sword turned into a series of afterimages that enveloped the last middle-aged man. The afterimages were so dense that it was hard for the naked eye to see which one was real and which one was fake. Even if one could catch a glimpse of the real sword, it would only be for a moment. In the next moment, the sword would once again be hidden in the afterimages. The middle-aged man's face became extremely serious. He decisively closed his eyes and used his spiritual sense to determine the trajectory of the sword. Then, the sword in his hand suddenly surged with Saint Qi as it slashed out. Jinshin's light wind sword continued to stab out, one strike after another, each strike faster than the one before. The frequency of his stab was so fast that it left behind a hazy afterimage. Many times, it would seem as if Jinshin had only stabbed out once, but in reality, he had already stabbed out multiple times. Every strike looked like a single strike, but in reality, he had already stabbed out multiple times. Facing such a fast attack, the middle-aged man simply couldn't block it. In just a few exchanges, his body was filled with multiple sword wounds. The opponent's strength is too strong. Young Master Sure, quickly activate the barrier. The middle-aged man was forced back by Jianshun. His voice was filled with some panic. A faint, bloody mark had already appeared on his neck. He had almost been slit by Jianshun. The young man was immediately alarmed when he heard the middle-aged man's cries for help. He glanced at the battle between Jianshun and the middle-aged man in a hurry, and his face immediately became rather ugly when he saw how the middle-aged man was forced back by Jianshun and could only defend. At the same time, the yellow-clothed woman who was fighting with the youth also turned her head to look at Jianshun. Her beautiful eyes were wide open, and her face was filled with disbelief. Her heart was filled with shock. How was this possible? How did his strength suddenly become so strong? He was clearly not so strong just now. Furthermore, he was shot by me earlier and was clearly injured. The yellow-clothed woman's face was filled with doubt. Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind, and she thought, could it be that when he fought with me earlier, he was deliberately hiding his strength? Little brat, you've ruined our Sure family's plans. Our Sure family will definitely not let you off. Even if you run to the ends of the earth, our Sure family's experts will definitely tear you to pieces. The youth gnashed his teeth as he spoke. Every word seemed to come from the gaps between his teeth. Just as he finished speaking, a transparent barrier suddenly appeared and enveloped his entire body. The young man gave up on attacking the girl. Instead, he attacked Jianshun with the middle-aged man against the barrier. His 3-meter-long sword was like a venomous snake. The tip of the spear constantly trembled as it stabbed towards Jianshin's heart, leaving behind blurs. The light wind sword in Jinshin's hand suddenly emitted a powerful and sharp sword Qi, blocking the spear. His sword followed the momentum of the spear and ruthlessly stabbed into the barrier surrounding the youth. The barrier slightly trembled, but quickly returned to normal. Although the barrier looked weak, its defense was extremely strong. Jinshin was unable to break through it. The youth did not have the slightest fear as he coldly stared at Jinshin and coldly said, "Little brat, your life won't be long." After saying that, the youth used his spear like a whip and smashed it towards Jinshin. Jinshin did not say anything as he dodged the spear and turned around to attack the middle-aged man. His light wind sword turned into a silver light as it pierced towards the middle-aged man's throat. The middle-aged man had always been afraid of Jinshin's swift sword, so he had always been on guard against Jianshan. Now that he saw Jianshan coming towards him, he immediately used his greatsword to block his throat, and at the same time quickly retreated into the barrier. Although being forced into such a sorry state by a 20-year-old brat was a very shameful thing, but compared to his own life, face was worth nothing. Just as Jinshan's light wind sword was about to pierce through the middle-aged man's greatsword, the tip of the light wind sword suddenly sank and pierced the middle-aged man's heart. The sword chi that was contained within the light wind sword immediately shot out and crushed the middle-aged man's heart. The middle-aged man's body suddenly stiffened as blood continuously flowed out from his mouth. His eyes stared at Jianshan in disbelief before his eyes widened and he slowly fell to the ground. He died with his eyes wide open. Ew. The face of the youth who was protected by the barrier was ashen. He was so angry that he was speechless. His eyes were filled with hatred as he stared at Jianshan. The hatred in his heart towards Jianshan had already reached a point of no return. Originally, their mission had been progressing very smoothly. Just when they were about to complete the mission and obtain the ruler armament, Jianshan had suddenly joined in at this crucial moment, completely turning the situation around. The mission that they were about to complete was instantly destroyed, and they had even lost 2 Earth Saint Masters. Serene, I want to see just how you'll take the ruler weapon from me now. The yellow-clothed girl was completely relieved. Her beautiful eyes were filled with hatred and anger as she stared at the young man in the barrier. Just a few days ago, a few of the talented uncles and elders of the Huang family who had followed her into this place had died in the hands of the Shi family in order to cover her escape. Thinking up to this point, the hatred in the yellow-clothed girl's heart grew even stronger. She slowly took out the longbow on her back and aimed at Serene before pulling the bowstring. She clearly knew that with her current strength, she was unable to break through the barrier. Serene face was incomparably gloomy. Good. I originally didn't want to use this secret treasure, but you forced me to. As he spoke, Serene took out a fist-sized piece of metal from his spatial ring. The piece of metal was dark green and had ancient patterns on it. Chapter 300. I didn't expect you to be so knowledgeable. You can even recognize the seal of Treasure Mountain that hasn't been seen in decades. Serene laughed coldly. The yellow-clothed girl immediately put away her bow and quickly slung it on her back. She hurriedly said to Jianshan, "Damn pervert, run." Before she even finished speaking, the yellow-clothed girl had already fled into the distance. She looked slightly flustered. Jianshan looked suspiciously at the yellow-clothed girl's flustered appearance. He was very confused. Was the fist-sized piece of metal in Serene's hand really that scary? Even though he was full of questions, Jianshan knew that there was something he didn't know. He no longer hesitated and quickly pulled away from Serene. Once the seal of Treasure Mountain comes out, don't even think about escaping. Serene's face was gloomy. He quickly threw the piece of metal in his hand into the air. The metal seal rapidly expanded in the air at an unbelievable speed. It instantly became a 100-meter-wide metal seal. It radiated with surging energy as it flew above Jinshan's head. Jinshan's eyes suddenly widened. He stared at the ink-black base of the metal seal in shock. His face was filled with disbelief. He could swear that he had never seen or even heard of something like this before. What is this weird thing? Jinshan's mind was filled with questions. He was very curious. However, the metal seal in the air did not give Jianshan any time to think. Just as Jianshan was stunned, the metal seal fell from the sky and pressed down on Jianshan with a majestic aura. Jianshan's face suddenly changed. Only now did he know the secret of the metal seal. It was something that could be used to smash people. If he was hit by it, he definitely would not feel good. Jianshan quickly fled outside. However, the metal seal covered an area of 100 meters and fell very quickly. Just as Jianshan had made it less than 20 meters away, the metal seal was already above his head. Jianshan roared out. His hands were filled with surging saint force as he slammed them against the bottom of the metal seal in an attempt to slow it down. However, the weight of the iron seal completely exceeded Jianshan's imagination. With a loud bang, The iron seal directly disappeared from the ground with Jinshan's body. It sank into the ground and created a deep pit. In front of him, the yellow-clothed girl looked at Jinshan, who was smashed into the ground by the iron seal. Her expression changed slightly. She stamped her feet in exasperation and cursed. "Damn hooligan! Why are you so stupid? Didn't I tell you to run? Why are you still standing there like a fool? You deserve to die. Umph. This is your fate for ruining the plans of my Shi family. I'll make sure you die without a grave," Shi Xiangran coldly said as he stared at Jinshan, who had been smashed into the ground. He understood the power of the seal of Treasure Mountain extremely well. It had been in the Shi family for several hundred years. As the family treasure, it had been passed down from generation to generation. Its power was unimaginable. There had never been an Earth Saint Master who could survive a single strike from it. Shi Xiangran raised his right hand, and the ground in front of him immediately began to churn. Afterward, the 100-meter-wide iron seal slowly rose up from the ground before turning back into a fist-sized piece of metal and falling into his hand. After putting away the seal of Treasure Mountain, Shi Xiangran quickly took off the space belts of the middle-aged men who had come with him. He then put away the barrier and chased after the yellow-clothed girl in the distance. Just as Shi Xiangran passed through the bottomless pit created by the seal of Treasure Mountain, a sudden change occurred. A figure covered in mud shot out from the pit like a bolt of lightning. A sword that flickered with silver light shot towards Shi Xiangran with a soaring sword chi. Shi Xiangran paled in fright. However, he was still an Earth Saint Master after all. His reaction was extremely fast. Just as the sword was about to pierce his body, a transparent barrier rapidly expanded from his body. Not only did it block the sword, but as the barrier continued to expand, the sword was forced further and further away from Shi Xiangran's body. You're actually still alive?" Shi Xiangran involuntarily cried out as he stared at the figure covered in mud in shock. He was greatly surprised by this outcome, as if he could not accept it. Seeing that his attack had been blocked by the barrier again, the mud-covered Jinshan sighed in disappointment. He quickly landed on the ground and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood mixed with bits of his organs. Shi Xiangran sneered and said, "You're the first Earth Saint Master to survive an attack from the seal of Treasure Mountain. You should feel honored. It looks like although you've taken an attack from the seal of Treasure Mountain, you've also been heavily injured. Then, let me use the seal of Treasure Mountain again to completely end your life. For an Earth Saint Master to be attacked by the seal of Treasure Mountain twice, you can die without regrets." Hearing this, Jinshan's expression changed. This time, he learned his lesson and immediately fled into the distance. The seal of Treasure Mountain turned back to the size of a mountain and flew towards Jinshan. The majestic pressure was so great that Jinshan almost suffocated. Only after taking an attack from the seal of Treasure Mountain did Jinshan truly understand just how powerful this strange thing was. If he was hit by the seal of Treasure Mountain again, he would probably be completely done for. Even if he managed to survive, he would only be left with half his life. Damn it, just what is this thing? How can it be so powerful? Why have I never heard of it before? Looking at the seal of Treasure Mountain that was rapidly flying towards him, Jinshan cursed in his heart. Back when he was in the library of Kargath Academy, he had never seen any information about these things. The seal of Treasure Mountain flew extremely quickly in the air. Jinshan was already heavily injured, so he could only use less than 50% of his speed. He was simply unable to outrun the seal of Treasure Mountain, so he could only watch as the seal of Treasure Mountain rapidly approached him. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Suddenly, the sound of the air being torn apart rang out in the distance. One golden arrow after another tore through the air and struck the seal of Treasure Mountain in the air. Boom! Following the violent explosion, the seal of Treasure Mountain that was as big as a mountain immediately shook in the air, and the speed at which it was chasing after Jinshan was greatly reduced. Seeing that the seal of Treasure Mountain was about to catch up with Jinshan and completely end his life, the yellow-clothed woman suddenly stepped in and used the longbow in her hand to forcibly hinder the seal of Treasure Mountain's flying speed, allowing Jinshan to escape from certain death. Standing on the side, Shi Xiangran was so angry that his nose was crooked. "You stinking woman, Wait until I catch you. I will definitely torture you to death. Sure Xiangran's face was extremely gloomy as he stared at the yellow-clothed woman who was continuously shooting arrows in the distance. He was flustered and exasperated as he roared loudly and gnashed his teeth. Stinking hooligan, quickly come to me. The yellow-clothed woman did not pay any attention to Shi Xiangran and shouted at Jianshan. Hearing this, Jianshan did not hesitate at all and immediately ran towards the yellow-clothed woman. Behind him, the Seal of Treasure Mountain was still relentlessly chasing after him. The yellow-clothed woman constantly pulled the bowstring and shot out golden arrows one after another. Not only did they hinder the Seal of Treasure Mountain's flying speed, but they also constantly shook the Seal of Treasure Mountain in the air. With the yellow-clothed woman's help, the distance between Jianshan and the Seal of Treasure Mountain grew larger and larger. In the end, he finally arrived beside the yellow-clothed woman. Let's go. The Seal of Treasure Mountain is extremely powerful. Once hit, even a Heaven Saint Master would be heavily injured. Fortunately, Shi Xiangran is not very strong and is unable to use the true power of the Seal of Treasure Mountain. The yellow-clothed woman shot arrows to stop the Seal of Treasure Mountain from approaching as she quickly retreated. The Seal of Treasure Mountain was continuously bombarded by the yellow-clothed woman's arrows, making it difficult for the Seal of Treasure Mountain to approach. The two of them took this opportunity to quickly retreat. When they had retreated to a certain distance, the yellow-clothed woman turned the longbow towards Shi Xiangran on the ground. Although she could not injure him, the powerful force of the explosion prevented him from taking a single step forward. The Seal of Treasure Mountain cannot be more than 50 meters away from Shi Xiangran, or else it will break free from his control, the yellow-clothed woman said from the side. She was clearly very familiar with the Seal of Treasure Mountain and knew quite a bit about it. The two of them quickly retreated from the area, while the Shi Xiangran behind them was unable to advance at all due to the golden arrows. In the end, he could only watch as Jianshan and the yellow-clothed woman left. His face was filled with unwillingness. For hours later, Jianshan and the yellow-clothed woman appeared several dozen kilometers away. They were hiding in a pitch-black cave. The cave was not large, and there were traces of it being excavated by humans. A pile of torches slowly burned in the cave, producing crackling sounds from time to time. Jianshan lay powerlessly in a corner. His face was extremely pale. First, he had been injured by the yellow-clothed woman's arrows. Then, he had gone through a bitter battle, causing his wounds that had yet to recover to become even more severe. In the end, he had been smashed into the ground by the Seal of Treasure Mountain, causing him great damage. With all these injuries added together, Jianshan had almost lost his life. Fortunately, his body had been refined by energy and had become extremely tough. If a regular Earth Saint Master had been smashed by the Seal of Treasure Mountain, they would have definitely died. The sound of clothes being torn rang out from the cave. The yellow-clothed woman was currently hiding behind a large rock, treating the wounds on her arm. The longbow remained on her back, never leaving her side. Cough, cough. Jianshan coughed twice and spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood. He was currently extremely heavily injured and needed to heal as soon as possible. However, with the yellow-clothed woman present, it was inconvenient for him to use Radiant Saint Force to heal quickly. Otherwise, this secret of his would definitely be exposed. Jianshan did not want to announce that he could control Radiant Saint Force because all Radiant Saint Masters on the Tianyuan continent did not have any martial prowess. They could be described as extremely weak. Not only was he an Earth Saint Master, his Radiant Saint Master level was quite high as well. If this matter was exposed, it would definitely cause him quite a lot of trouble. As a result, he could only endure silently to one side. He constantly circulated Saint Force within him and used the most basic method to heal. Chapter 301. Jianshan did not hold back. He extended his hand and grabbed the bottle. Unscrewing the cap, he placed the bottle in his mouth. Right now, it was inconvenient for him to use Radiant Saint Force to heal, so this kind of medicine was exactly what he needed. Moreover, he was immune to poisons, so he was not afraid of a yellow-clothed woman giving him poison. The bottle was not filled with pills. Instead, It was filled with a liquid. It was extremely bitter. Jianshan poured all the liquid in the bottle into his mouth before slowly swallowing it. As the liquid entered his stomach, a warm current slowly appeared in his body and quickly spread in all directions. Sensing the changes in his body, Jianshan immediately closed his eyes and focused on healing. However, he still maintained a high level of vigilance towards the outside world. Although the matter between him and the yellow-clothed woman had been settled, who could guarantee that this unruly and willful young miss of a large clan would not suddenly stab him with a sword when he was unprepared? The young woman looked at Jianshan, who had closed his eyes to heal, with a complicated gaze. Afterwards, she silently walked to the fire and sat down. She hugged her knees with both hands as her bright and intelligent eyes stared blankly at the flickering flames. Who knew what she was thinking about? A strange silence filled the cave. Only the flickering flames of the torches illuminated the pitch-black cave. The flames burned, producing crackling sound from time to time. While Jianshan was healing, the young woman did not do anything to Jianshan. She sat in front of the fire the entire time, staring blankly at the flickering flames in a daze. For hours later, Jianshan slowly opened his eyes and sat up with some difficulty. He leaned against the cold wall behind him. After 4 hours of treatment, he had completely absorbed the medicinal effects of the healing medicine. Although he was still far from fully recovered, at least the injuries in his body had stabilized. Jianshan looked at the yellow-clothed woman who sat in front of the fire in a daze. His gaze paused on the golden bow on her back for a while. He said, "Can you tell me what kind of weapon is that bow on your back? Why is it so powerful? And the seal of Treasure Mountain in the hands of the person who tried to kill you. What kind of weapons are those? They are clearly not your saint weapons, but why are their powers so terrifying?" Jianshan was filled with questions. He desperately wanted to know the answer. Hearing this, the yellow-clothed woman slightly raised her head and glanced at Jianshan. She then lowered her head and continued to look at the flickering flames without saying anything. Jianshan did not ask any more questions. Although he really wanted to know the secrets of these things, if the yellow-clothed woman was unwilling to tell him, he would not beg her. These weapons are all ruler armaments. A while later, the yellow-clothed woman finally said something. The conditions for forming ruler armaments are extremely harsh. There aren't many of them on the Tianyuan continent. It said that these ruler armaments were all used by saint rulers. After the saint rulers passed away, these saint weapons did not disperse into the surroundings. Instead, they were perfectly preserved. The woman in yellow slowly removed the bow from her shoulder and gently stroked it with her hand. She said, "This bow is called the Sun Moon Bow. It's a ruler's weapon left behind by an ancestor of our Huang clan after he passed away. It has been passed down from generation to generation as our clan's heirloom. It's actually a saint weapon condensed from the body of a saint ruler. No wonder it's so powerful." Jianshan came to a realization. The seal of Treasure Mountain in Shi Xiangran's hand is also a ruler armament, but it's much more powerful than my Sun Moon Bow. Coupled with the fact that he's already stronger than me, having reached the second cycle of Earth Saint Master, the power of the seal of Treasure Mountain is even greater. My Sun Moon Bow is not his opponent at all, the woman continued. Then what's with the barrier around him? Jianshan continued to ask. If it were not for the barrier, he would have killed Shi Xiangran long ago. That barrier was left behind by a saint ruler on him. It's extremely powerful. Even my Sun Moon Bow can't break through it, Jianshan said. The yellow-clothed woman slightly frowned. She felt extremely troubled by the barrier around Shi Xiangran. Then is there a way to break the barrier around him, or make it disappear? Jianshan asked. The yellow-clothed woman said, "There is, but we can't do it. When the power of the attack exceeds the limit of what the barrier can withstand, the barrier will naturally be broken. In addition, when the barrier's power is used up, it will disappear. However, as for how long the barrier's power can last, I don't know." Reaching this point, the yellow-clothed woman gnashed her teeth and hatefully said, "If it weren't for Shi Xiangran's barrier, I would have killed him with an arrow long ago. That hateful Shi family, they actually took advantage of the mercenary tournament to steal our Huang family's ruler armament. My poor uncles, In order to cover my escape, they were all killed by Xiangran. Once we get out, I'll definitely get Uncle Feng and Uncle Yun to avenge the deaths of our Huang family." The yellow-clothed woman's eyes were filled with hatred and fury. Hearing this, Jinshin chuckled and said, "I seem to have heard Xiangran say that the wind and cloud elders that you rely on have already been dealt with. They can't protect you at all." The girl immediately clenched her fists tightly and hatefully said, "That hateful Shi family. They've always been targeting our Huang family's Sun Moon Bao. This time, they must have planned it all out." Hearing this, Jinshin couldn't help but feel a sense of schadenfreude. He chuckled and said, "Xiangran has the barrier protecting him, so he can't be harmed at all. Moreover, he has the Treasure Mountain seal, and he came prepared. It seems that this time, your Huang family's Sun Moon Bao is destined to fall into the hands of the Shi family." Who would have thought that the girl's reaction would be so great? She suddenly stood up and angrily glared at Jinshin. She angrily said, "Damn rogue, you better not say such unpleasant things. Do you believe that I won't teach you a lesson right now?" I'm only speaking the truth." Jinshin was not afraid at all, as if he had nothing to fear. "You." The girl angrily glared at Jinshin. She was extremely angry. Finally, she snorted and walked out of the cave. The girl's departure was exactly what Jinshin wanted. After using his hearing to confirm that the girl had gone far away, Jinshin immediately focused his mind to control the Radiant Saint Force to heal his injuries. As the Radiant Saint Force slowly gathered, the dim cave lit up in an instant. The milky white light emitted by the Radiant Saint Force was very obvious in the daytime, and in this dim cave, the white light emitted by the Radiant Saint Force was even more eye-catching. The milky white light was comparable to the scorching sun in the sky, illuminating the dim cave in a dazzling white light. It was very dazzling, but it was not blinding. Controlling the Radiant Saint Force was mainly the effect of his spirit, and Jinshin's spirit also increased at the same time as his strength. Ever since he broke through to Earth's Saint Master, his spirit had also been refined, becoming much more powerful than before. As a result, his Radiant Saint Force was much stronger than before. Not only did it make the Radiant Saint Force more dense, it even lasted longer. In just 2 hours, the Radiant Saint Force had completely healed Jinshin's injuries. Its effects were so great that they could be described as miraculous. Jinshin's complexion returned to normal, and he immediately jumped up from the ground. He took out a large jug of water from his space ring, took off his muddy clothes, and began to wash his body. Jinshin had prepared all this water beforehand. Because his space ring was large enough, he had stored over 20 large gourds of water. Every gourd had a total of 50 kilograms of water. This was to prevent himself from falling into an environment where there was a severe lack of water, in case he needed it. Splash, splash, splash. The ice-cold water flowed down Jinshin's head, washing away all the dirt and mud that remained on Jinshin's body. The water fell to the ground, creating a series of splashing sounds. In this sealed cave with only one entrance, it was extremely ear-piercing, producing a loud noise. At this moment, the yellow-clothed woman was sitting alone on a rock outside the cave with a heavy heart. Her face was filled with worry. She was extremely worried that what Jinshin had said would really happen. The Shi family had come prepared this time. Although Brother Feng Yun was powerful, there were many experts in the Shi family who could stop Brother Feng Yun and Brother Feng Yun. From Xiangran's words, it was not difficult to tell that the Shi family had already sent out experts to deal with Brother Feng Yun and Brother Feng Yun outside. As a result, once she left, she would have nothing to rely on. In this trial space, Xiangran was protected by a barrier. Although she possessed the king armament, the Sun Moon Bao, she was far too weak. She was unable to use the full power of the Sun Moon Bao, so she was unable to do anything to Xiangran. In addition, the Treasure Mountain seal in Xiangran's hand was also a king weapon with very powerful attack power. Once Xiangran used the Treasure Mountain seal to restrain his Sun Moon Bao, he would not be able to resist Xiangran's attack. Although she could use the Sun Moon Bao to restrain Xiangran's movements through the barrier, she would always be in a passive position. It was not a long-term plan, and she could not draw the sun-moon bow endlessly. If this continued, she would run out of Saint Force sooner or later. Oomph. I have to keep the sun-moon bow. At worst, I'll just stay in Mercenary City and wait for the clan to save me. I don't believe your sure family will dare to touch me in Mercenary City. The woman's face was icy cold as she made up her mind. At this moment, a strange sound rang out from the cave behind her. The woman was immediately attracted by it. She glanced back at the pitch-black cave in doubt as she mumbled to herself, "Strange, why is there a sound? That hoodlum is clearly heavily injured, so how can he make such a big noise?" The young girl calmed herself down, and with a head full of doubts, she quietly walked into the winding cave. At this moment, Jianshin was still washing himself in the cave. Although the woman carefully made her way into the cave, she did not give off any killing intent or presence, so she was not dangerous at all. Jinshin's vision had also been greatly affected by the sound of the water falling to the ground, so he did not sense the woman's entry at all. Very soon, the woman carefully made her way into the cave with a face filled with curiosity. However, when she used the flickering light to see the situation inside, she immediately became stunned. What she saw was the scene of Jianshin washing himself. Jianshin was currently completely naked. "Ah, you hoodlum." The woman reacted very quickly and let out an ear-piercing shriek. Clang! The large gourd that Jianshin held high above his head fell to the ground. Jianshin reacted very quickly and immediately took out a set of clothes from his space ring. He flashed to a dark corner where the light from the fire could not reach. He did not care about his wet body and hurriedly put on the clothes. Chapter 302. After leaving, the young girl did not enter the cave again, and Jianshin quickly put on his clothes. His face was slightly red, and he was extremely embarrassed. He did not think that the young girl would be so rude. She had actually entered without a sound, and not even the sound of her footsteps could be heard. This was definitely done on purpose. If it wasn't for the girl's big reaction, Jianshin really suspected that the girl still hated him for peeping at her body. Today, she wanted to peep back. If Jianshin's thoughts were known by the girl in yellow, she might even have thoughts of jumping into the river to commit suicide. After putting on his clothes, Jianshin walked out of the cave. The girl in yellow stood not far from the entrance of the cave. Her back was facing Jianshin, but Jianshin could still clearly see her pink neck and red cheeks. Jianshin couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed that a girl saw him bathing. But in the next moment, his face became serious. He shouted at the girl, "Hey, how can you be so rude? You actually came in quietly and peeped at me bathing." A few years ago, Jianshin unintentionally peeped at the girl's body and suffered a lot. Today, the girl actually sneaked into the cave and peeped at him bathing. It wasn't easy to get a chance to turn things around, so of course, Jianshin wouldn't miss it. The girl's face was originally embarrassed, but when she heard Jianshin say that she came in quietly and peeped at him bathing, her red face was instantly filled with anger. She no longer cared about being embarrassed and suddenly turned to glare at Jianshin. "Bah, who peeped at you bathing? Which eyes of yours saw it?" Jianshin was speechless. At that time, his eyes were closed because of the water. He didn't see the girl's figure at all. He only heard her scream, but Jianshin wouldn't be so honest. He immediately put on a serious face and said, "Both of my eyes saw it." "Bah, you stinking hooligan, you're so shameless. I should be the one asking you. That's obviously my cave. I'm already kind enough to let you live in it. You actually didn't even inform me, the owner, before taking a bath inside. That's your fault, so how can you blame me?" The girl immediately counterattacked. In order to save her face and not let Jianshin catch her, she was going all out. This cave was clearly dug out by someone before. When did it become yours? Jianshin's face was full of confusion. This is an ownerless cave. I was the first to enter. Of course, I'm the owner of this cave, the girl said confidently. Her sharp tongue was her forte when it came to bickering. Then Jianshin was not convinced and continued to bicker with the girl. Soon, he was speechless and lost. He knew that if he continued to bicker with the girl, he would lose without a doubt. When it came to killing, he wouldn't even frown. There weren't many people who could be stronger than him. However, once he started bickering with someone, he would immediately lose. Moreover, the girl's mouth was full of crooked reasoning. She made 1 into 2 and 2 into 3. Moreover, she said it confidently and logically as if it was true. Jianshun, who was not good at bickering, was completely under her control. You are good. Jianshun had a belly full of anger. He wanted to use this to humiliate the girl, but he didn't expect that after just a few words, he would be completely suppressed by the girl. There was no room for him to turn the situation around. I saw your body and you saw mine. Moreover, I also saved your life. We are even now. From now on, we don't owe each other anything. Goodbye. After throwing down these words, Jianshun left without looking back. You pervert. After hearing Jianshun say that he had seen her body, the girl suddenly became flustered and exasperated. She couldn't help but recall the scene of their first meeting. Her beautiful face was red with anger and shame. The good mood she had after seeing Jianshun being humiliated instantly disappeared without a trace. What do you mean you saved my life? Didn't I save you once? If it weren't for me restraining the seal of Treasure Mountain for you, you would have been smashed into meat paste. The girl was so angry that she didn't let go of any opportunity to fight back. Hearing this, Jianshun's advancing body slightly paused. The situation was just as the girl said. If it weren't for her using the sun and moon bow to restrain the seal of Treasure Mountain, he really wouldn't have been able to escape from it. However, he didn't want to explain anything and continued to walk away. At this time, the girl suddenly discovered that Jianshun's injuries had miraculously healed. He even seemed to be full of energy. The girl's face was filled with shock. She couldn't understand how Jianshun's extremely heavy injuries could be healed in just 2 hours. Hey, stinking hooligan, how can you recover from your injuries so quickly? The girl asked from behind. Her voice still carried a trace of anger, but her pair of lively eyes were blinking, full of curiosity. I have an even better healing panacea. Jianshun didn't want to answer, but if he did, the girl in yellow would inevitably guess his secret. In order to dispel her doubts, he could only make up a random reason. As he spoke, Jianshun's body had already walked further and further away. He was about to disappear from the girl in yellow's sight. Looking at Jianshun's back, the girl in yellow hesitated. In the end, she gritted her teeth and chased after him. At the same time, she shouted, "Stop right there, pervert! Where are you going?" The girl in yellow quickly arrived behind Jianshun. Jianshun didn't even turn his head as he walked forward step by step. He said emotionlessly, "Why are you following me?" "Tui, who's following you?" The girl in yellow glared at him and said, "You killed 2 experts of the Shi family. The Shi family definitely won't let you go. Shi Xiangran has a barrier for defense and the seal of Treasure Mountain for attack. If you meet him alone, you definitely won't be his opponent. Without my help, you won't even be able to escape if you meet Shi Xiangran. You're the one who's afraid." Jianshun said indifferently. The girl's eyebrows furrowed. "What's there to be afraid of? Pervert, don't talk nonsense. Do you believe that I won't cut you into pieces right now? If you throw away the bow, you won't be my opponent at all. Even if you have the bow, you won't be able to defeat me." Jianshun seemed to have forgotten his previous unhappiness and returned to his normal self. He said emotionlessly, without any emotion in his voice, "You." The girl was quite angry. Her chest heaved violently, but she couldn't find anything to say. Jianshun was able to kill 2 Earth Saint Masters of the Shi family in an extremely short amount of time, despite being injured. Moreover, he still had the strength to fight with Shi Xiangran. This showed that he was much stronger than her. After a moment of silence, the girl slowly calmed down. After hesitating for a while, she said with a face full of unwillingness, "You've seen Shi Xiangran's strength. He has a barrier protecting him, so we can't hurt him at all. However, he can use the seal of Treasure Mountain to attack us. If we meet him alone, we'll definitely be at a disadvantage. If the situation is bad, we won't even have the chance to survive. My Sun Moon Bow can restrain Shi Xiangran's footsteps and limit the attack range of the seal of Treasure Mountain. You can deal with the helpers Shi Xiangran may bring. This is the only way we can deal with Shi Xiangran." The girl still couldn't bring herself to say it directly. She could only use very clever words to express her intentions. Her intention to work together was obvious. Jianshun thought about it for a while and then nodded in agreement. He had killed 2 experts of the Shi family, so the Shi family and Shi Xiangran definitely wouldn't let him go. Shi Xiangran had a barrier protecting him, so his defense was very strong. Even the Sun Moon, Bao couldn't break through it. Jianshun couldn't guarantee that his sword chi wouldn't be able to break through the barrier. If even the sword chi couldn't do anything, then Jianshun wouldn't have any other way to kill Shi Xiangran. However, Shi Xiangran could use the barrier to control the seal of Treasure Mountain to attack him. At that time, if the girl didn't have the Sun Moon Bao to restrain the seal of Treasure Mountain, it would definitely take him a lot of effort to escape from the seal of Treasure Mountain. Even if he could escape, he would have to face Shi Xiangran's pursuit all day long. Shi Xiangran completely relied on the treasure to make Jianshun helpless. If he abandoned the treasure, then Jianshun wouldn't even put him in his eyes. Jianshun couldn't afford to be chased all over the place by someone he didn't even put in his eyes. Working together with the girl was also a perfect plan. Jianshun and the girl in yellow walked together. The 2 of them rarely spoke, and even when they did, they didn't chat. They didn't even know each other's names. Clearly, there was still a barrier between the 2 of them. Along the way, there were quite a few participants who saw how young the 2 of them were and how beautiful the girl was. They all became lustful and came up to make things difficult for the 2 of them. Not only were there great Saint Masters among them, there were also a few Earth Saint Masters. However, they had clearly underestimated the 2 of them. Most of them had their throats slit by Jianshun's sword, and the girl in yellow had angered a few people who had said extremely unpleasant things. The girl in yellow had taken the initiative to attack and killed them all. An Earth Saint Master had even been shot to death by the Sun Moon Bao on her back, dying in an extremely miserable manner. The girl in yellow didn't seem very old, but clearly wasn't the first time she had killed people. Even though she couldn't be as calm and collected as Jianshun, her expression didn't change at all. She acted decisively and mercilessly, which made Jianshun secretly admire her. It was indeed very rare for a child of a large clan to be able to do something like this, and she was also the daughter of a large clan. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Jianshun and the girl in yellow didn't see Shi Xiangran. They were now far away from the mountain range filled with sword-shaped peaks and had arrived at an uneven mountain range covered in grass. During this period of time, Jianshun and the girl in yellow still maintained their previous indifference. They rarely spoke and almost never chatted. It was worth mentioning that the 2 of them had obtained an extremely great harvest in this half a month. They had found over 2,000 tokens from the Earth Saint Masters, but they had found less than 50 tokens from the Great Saint Masters. It was now the end of the elimination round. There was only a month and a few days left until the end of the competition. After this period of fighting, almost all of the tokens had been gathered in the hands of the Great Saint Masters. There were very few Great Saint Masters who still had tokens left. Just as Jianshun and the girl in yellow climbed up a high slope, the sound of battle rang out in Jianshun's ears. Looking over, he saw a person wrapped in a layer of wind, attributed Saint Force fighting against 2 Earth Saint Masters. Not far away, there was a person covered in blood lying on the ground. The wind attributed Saint Force Earth Saint Master was extremely powerful. He was able to force the 2 Earth Saint Masters back by himself. Both of them were covered in wounds, and their clothes were dyed red. They were completely covered in blood. However, the wind attributed Saint Force Earth Saint Master was completely unharmed. Chapter 303. Qin Xiao. Jianshun yelled out in grief and indignation. He left behind an afterimage as he charged toward the 3 of them with lightning-like speed. At the same time, a tremendous killing intent radiated from his body. It was frightening as it soared into the sky. The yellow-clothed woman standing beside Jianshun had a golden bow on her back. She stared at Jianshun in surprise as he disappeared into the distance. This was the first time she had seen Jianshun lose his composure like this in the days that she had spent with Jianshun. His emotions fluctuated so greatly. Afterwards, he took small steps and walked down the hill at a steady pace. Jianshun's yell was obviously heard by the 3 of them. The two blood-soaked people immediately roused their spirits. They never thought that they would actually encounter someone who knew the young master of the Tianqin clan at such a crucial moment. The two of them, who were already at the end of their rope, immediately lit up with joy as if they had found a life-saving straw. When they looked over with joy, they became stunned. Their faces darkened, and their joy from before completely vanished. The two of them knew Jianshan. He was a friend that the young master of the Tianqin clan, Qin Shao, had made outside. Although his talent was quite good, reaching the strength of a great Saint Master at such a young age, their opponent was an Earth Saint Master, and an extremely powerful one with wind-attributed Saint Force. Even when the two of them worked together, they could only retreat, let alone Jianshan, who was only a great Saint Master. At this moment, the wind-attributed Earth Saint Master also discovered Jianshan's arrival. However, when he saw Jianshan's young and handsome face, his face suddenly changed. He could not help but think of what had happened half a month ago. A deep fear suddenly appeared in the wind-attributed Earth Saint Master's heart. He no longer had the courage to continue fighting. I'll let you go for now. The wind-attributed Earth Saint Master threw out these harsh words. His face was filled with unwillingness as he quickly fled into the distance. After the middle-aged man left, one of the blood-soaked people finally fainted because he was heavily injured and had overused his Saint Force. The other person was not much better off. He sat on the ground with a withered expression. Qin Shao, how are you? Wake up! An urgent call rang out from his side. Jianshan had already arrived in front of Qin Shao. He held Qin Zhao's head as he urgently called out. His voice was filled with indescribable anxiety. Qin Zhao's injuries were extremely heavy. Not only was he covered in blood, but the surrounding grass was also covered in blood as well. 2 wounds on his body. His waist, which was as thick as a bucket, had been cut in half. Only half of his waist, leaving only half of his lower body. The other wound was on his chest. Organs. Not a single part of his body was half of his waist. Whereas half of his waist was Qin Shao. Quick, use your bow to shoot him down. Don't let him escape. Jianshan's face was filled with killing intent. He pointed at the azure figure that had already escaped 2 kilometers away and was about to disappear into the mountains as he yelled at the yellow-clothed woman. The yellow-clothed woman who was walking over unhurriedly originally wanted to use the sun-moon bow to kill the person who had escaped. However, when she heard Jianshan's commanding tone, she immediately frowned and stopped. She withdrew her bow and coldly said, I'm not going to shoot. Why should I listen to you? Bang! Jianshan heavily smashed his fist into the ground, creating a half-meter deep crater in the soft ground. His bloodshot eyes stared at the girl in yellow with an extremely sharp gaze. His intense killing intent was not concealed at all. This time, Jianshan was truly enraged. Being stared at by Jianshan like a bloodthirsty beast, the yellow-clothed woman's heart violently trembled. She immediately stopped in her tracks and felt an inexplicable sense of sorrow. At this moment, she suddenly regretted not killing the person who had escaped. When she changed her mind, the wind-attributed Earth Saint Master had already crossed the mountain and disappeared. Jianshan. Just when Jianshan was about to use his Radiant Saint Force to heal Qin Shao, an almost inaudible voice suddenly entered Jianshan's ears. Qin Zhao's tightly shut eyes opened a tiny slit. His lips trembled slightly as he mumbled something. Qin Shao, hang in there. I'll help you recover very soon. With that, Jianshan was about to use his Radiant Saint Force to heal Qin Shao. Qin Shao was currently in an extremely dangerous situation. His life was hanging by a thread, and he could die at any time. Jianshan. Qin Shao could only open his eyes a tiny slit. He raised his right hand with great difficulty and grabbed Jianshan's hand. He slowly placed it on his waist and stammered, Help! Help take a small green bottle out of my space belt on my waist belt, the small green bottle out. Qin Zhao's voice was weak. He could not even make a sound towards the end. All he could do was sigh. With that, his head tilted to the side, and he fainted. Jianshan still heard Qin Zhao's words clearly. He immediately and carefully removed Qin Zhao's space belt afraid that he would touch his wounds. Afterwards, he rummaged through it in a hurry. In the end, he found 3 small green jade bottles on a wooden shelf. Jianshun took out the 3 jade bottles before opening all 3 of them. He checked the contents of the bottles. Every single bottle contained a thumb-sized pill that shone with a weak white light. This is... Jianshun was shocked. He could clearly sense that although the 3 pills were just powder on the surface, they were filled with pure Radiant Saint force. Jianshun was a Radiant Saint master himself, so he understood the effects of Radiant Saint force extremely well. He immediately poured a pill out of the bottle and fed it to Qin Xiao. With the ingestion of the pill, Qin Xiao's complexion rapidly improved. Although the tiny amount of Radiant Saint force in the pill was not enough to heal his wounds, it was enough to keep his life. However, he did not wake up. After Qin Xiao's wounds stabilized, Jianshun let out a huge sigh of relief. Only now did he look at the 2 bloodied men. Jianshun had seen the 2 of them before. One of them was the Zither Master. According to Qin Xiao, the Zither Master was an infant that his grandfather had brought back. She had grown up in the Tianqin clan and was loyal to the clan. She was still unconscious right now. The other person was not a member of the Tianqin clan. Instead, he was one of the 3 people who had come to Mercenary City with Tianzhou through the Space Gate. He was Tianzhou's brother who had gone through thick and thin with him. Currently, he was also pale-faced as he sat on the ground powerlessly. He ate medicine to heal his wounds silently. 3 silhouettes appeared on a high slope in the distance and rapidly approached this place. The arrival of the 3 people immediately raised everyone's guard. "Brother." Suddenly, a voice mixed with joy came from the side. The person who was sitting at the side and eating healing medicine looked at the 3 people who were walking over with excitement. Then, he struggled to get up from the ground. The 3 people were actually Tianzhou and the other 2 people who had been brought over by Tianzhou from the Tianqin clan. "Brother, brother, brother." Tianzhou and the other 2 quickly recognized the person who was covered in blood. They cried out in alarm and quickly ran over. "Fourth brother, what happened to you? Who hurt you like this?" "Fourth brother, hurry up and tell me, which bastard beat you up like this?" The other 2 were infuriated when they saw how their brother was covered in blood. Tianzhou's complexion was very ugly as well. The 3 of them glanced around the area. Obviously, they discovered the unconscious Tianzhou and the young master of the Qin family. They also noticed Jianshun and the yellow-clothed woman behind him. "Who are you?" One of them glared at the yellow-clothed woman and angrily called out. Jianshun had come with them, so they all recognized Jianshun. They only did not recognize the yellow-clothed woman. The yellow-clothed woman glanced at them in disdain before turning her head to the side in a haughty manner. She could not even be bothered to look at them, let alone say anything. Her disdain was evident. The yellow-clothed woman's attitude made the man's face turn cold. He yelled out again, "Girl, I'm asking you a question. Are you deaf? Can't you hear me?" The yellow-clothed woman's face sank when she heard that. Killing intent filled her eyes as she stared at the man. She growled, "If you say another word, I'll kill you immediately." If it were not for the fact that Jianshun was standing to the side, and she guessed that Jianshun probably knew them, the yellow-clothed woman would have attacked them long ago. After all, the 3 of them were Earth Saint Masters and possessed quite a few battle medallions. "You." The man was infuriated. His Saint force surged as a curved blade appeared in his hand. He roared, "You must be tired of living. Let me teach you a lesson right now." He was about to charge forward when he finished speaking. "Sigh, second brother, you really don't know how to be romantic. How can you even lay your hands on such a pretty girl?" An ugly person standing beside Zhou Tian extended his hand to stop his second brother, who had already drawn his saint weapon. He glanced at the yellow-clothed woman with a perverted gaze. The second brother was slightly surprised when he heard that, but he soon returned to his senses. He snickered. "Third brother, you're still the quick-witted one. It's just too much of a pity to kill such a pretty girl." He then snickered at the yellow-clothed woman. "Little beauty, I've changed my mind now. It's just too much of a pity to kill such a pretty girl like you. Why don't you accompany us for a bit first? If we're satisfied with your service, we'll naturally let you go." The yellow-clothed woman's face was frosty and extremely gloomy. Jinshin's face sank slightly when he heard that. Although he had a great opinion of the yellow-clothed woman because of what had happened earlier, he really could not stand the actions of these two people. Moreover, he was in the same boat as the yellow-clothed woman no matter what. Jinshin clearly did not have a good impression of Zhou Tian and the others. Zhou Tian had made things difficult for Jinshin quite a bit in the Tianqing clan before. If you don't want to die, the two of you better watch your mouths. Jinshin slowly stood up and glared at them coldly as he growled. Fuck, kid. We're talking to the little beauty. Why do you have to interfere? Do you want to die? The second brother glared at Jinshin and roared. His face was filled with killing intent. Although Jinshin was on good terms with the first young master of the Tianqing clan, Qin Shao, and Tianzhou was also a part of the Tianqing clan, as Tianzhou's brothers. They knew that Tianzhou hated Jinshin very much. Tianzhou's face sank as well. His gaze towards Jinshin was filled with intense killing intent. Back in the Tianqing clan, Tianzhou had a great opinion of Jinshin and had argued with him. If the patriarch of the Tianqing clan had not arrived in time to stop the two of them, he would have attacked Jinshin long ago. On the way to Mercenary City, Tianzhou had wanted to attack Jinshin more than once, but he had held himself back because of the Great Elder. Now that such a great opportunity had presented itself before him, he obviously would not miss it. Tianzhou glanced at the bloodied fourth brother. The fourth brother quickly understood what Zhou Tian was trying to say. He immediately pointed at Jinshin and yelled, "Big brother, second brother, third brother, we were injured by this brat. This brat is cruel and unscrupulous. He wanted to kill Qin Shao from the Tianqing clan. Me and another brother from the Tianqing clan were caught off guard and were heavily injured by his sneak attack. If you hadn't arrived in time, I probably wouldn't have been able to see you again." Little Four said with tears and snot. He was in an extremely miserable state. Tianzhou's face was extremely sunken. He stared at Jinshin coldly and said, "Brat, to think that my big brother was so polite to you, treating you as an honored guest. Yet, you actually did such a heartless thing. Today I, Tianzhou, will not forgive you. Third brother, go capture the murderer who wanted to kill my nephew Qin Shao." In Tianzhou's eyes, Jinshin was only a great Saint Master. He did not take him seriously at all, so he would not lower himself to personally take action. "Yes, big brother." The third brother immediately responded. He walked towards Jinshin with a sneer. He did not even take out his own saint weapon. He did not take this brat, who was only a great Saint Master, seriously at all. A cold light flickered through Jinshin's eyes. He did not try to explain himself, because it was completely unnecessary. "Stop!" Suddenly, a rather weak voice rang out. The bloodied Qin Ju had awoken at some point in time. He crawled up from the ground with difficulty and weakly said, "You've misunderstood. We were injured by an extremely powerful Earth Saint Master. It has nothing to do with this young man." Tianzhou's expression changed slightly. He glanced at the Qin Ju and yelled, "Nonsense! Qin Ju, you must be muddle-headed. You, fourth brother, and nephew Qin Shao were clearly injured by this brat. There was no one else." Hearing this, the Qin Ju's eyes flickered, but he did not make a sound. He had just woken up and did not hear what Tianzhou had said, so he was not clear about the situation. But now, he could tell that Zhou Tian was sincerely trying to make things difficult for Jinshin. He was currently heavily injured and could not even take care of himself. Even if he wanted to stop this, he did not have the strength to do so. At this time, the third brother had already arrived in front of Jinshin. He stared at Jinshin's handsome face with a cold smile. He directly reached out his hand to grab Jinshin's shoulder. The strength of his hand was so great that if a normal great Saint Master was caught by this hand, their bones would have been crushed. Jinshin's eyes flashed with a cold light. The light wind sword appeared in his right hand. Before the third brother could react, the light wind sword's sharp edge was already on his neck. This sudden turn of events caused the third brother to turn pale with fright. His hand that was about to grab Jinshin's shoulder also froze in midair. He could neither advance nor retreat. Why? The third brother was tongue-tied as he stared at the sword that was already on his neck. He was so shocked that he could not say anything. A great Saint Master had actually placed a weapon on his neck without him noticing. This caused the third brother, who was only an Earth Saint Master, to be extremely shocked. He found it hard to accept this fact. If you continue to distort the truth, then don't blame me for being impolite, Jinshin coldly said as he looked at Zhou Tian and the others. Being threatened by Junior caused Tian Zhou to feel extremely embarrassed. He yelled out, "Go, kill him, and save the third brother." As he said that, a large, fiery red sword appeared in Tian Zhou's hand. He raised it and charged at Jinshin. The second brother also took out his own saint weapon and charged at Jinshin with Tian Zhou. At the same time, the third brother's eyes flashed with a strong, killing intent. Taking advantage of the fact that Jinshin's attention was on the other two, he clawed at Jinshin's throat with lightning speed. Jinshin coldly snorted as a disdainful sneer appeared on his face. Following that, the light wind sword on the third brother's neck suddenly sliced off. The third brother's head was immediately separated from his neck, causing blood to spurt out like a fountain. Very quickly, the ground was dyed red with blood. Third brother, third brother, third brother. The eyes of the four people on Tian Zhou were about to pop out of their sockets as they cried out in grief. "You bastard, if I don't kill you today, I'm not a man." Avenge the third brother. Tian Zhou and the others' faces were filled with killing intent. Their eyes burned with rage, as if they wanted nothing more than to cut Jinshin into pieces. Search! Suddenly, the sound of something tearing through the air rang out. A golden streak of light shot out from behind Jinshin, piercing through the second brother's chest with lightning speed. A fist-sized hole appeared where his heart should have been. His heart had already vanished. The golden light didn't slow down in the slightest after piercing through the second brother's chest. Instead, it continued to shoot backward until it finally disappeared into a mountain several hundred meters away, leaving behind a bottomless hole. Jinshin turned around to see the yellow-clothed girl behind him with a frosty expression. At this moment, she was holding the golden sun-moon bow, still in the posture of shooting an arrow. The second brother had previously insulted her. With the yellow-clothed girl's personality, she naturally wouldn't let him off. If it wasn't for the fact that the third brother's head had already been cut off by Jinshin, the yellow-clothed girl would have already shot the third brother to death. The second brother's eyes were wide open as he stared at the yellow-clothed girl with disbelief. He didn't think that a weak girl who wasn't even 20 years old would have such terrifying battle strength. The speed of the golden arrow was so fast that he didn't even have time to react. Boom! The second brother's body collapsed. He had been killed by a weak girl who wasn't even 20 years old. He died with a grievance. Seeing the fate of the second brother, Tian Zhou's expression changed drastically. He immediately paled. Whether it was Jinshin's strength or the yellow-clothed girl's, they had both exceeded his expectations. The two Earth Saint Masters who were similar in strength to him had actually been slain in a single clash. In particular, the golden arrow that the yellow-clothed girl had shot out filled Tian Zhou with dread. If that arrow had been shot at him, it would have been impossible for him to dodge at such a close distance. He would have ended up the same as the second brother. Tian Zhou's charge toward Jinshin immediately came to a halt. The current situation had completely exceeded his expectations, leaving him in a dilemma. Jinshin coldly stared at the pale-faced Tian Zhou and mocked. "Didn't you say you wanted to kill me? Why aren't you doing it now?" Hearing this, Tian Zhou's expression immediately became ugly. His eyes were filled with hatred as he stared at Jinshin and the yellow-clothed girl. Gritting his teeth, he said, "Brad, Tian Zhou, will not forget what happened today." With that, Tian Zhou's body moved, and he immediately fled into the distance. The yellow-clothed girl immediately drew her bow and was about to shoot down Tian Zhou when at this moment, Jinshin left behind an afterimage as he chased after Tian Zhou at a speed even faster than him. As he chased after Tian Zhou, Jinshin's light wind sword danced as streaks of sharp sword chi shot toward Tian Zhou. Sensing that something was wrong behind him, Tian Zhou immediately began to dodge. At the same time, the huge sword in his hand was filled with fire-attributed saint force as it shattered the sword chi that he could not dodge. Because of this delay, Tian Zhou's speed slowed down and Jinshin caught up to him very quickly. Jinshin's light wind sword immediately stabbed out mercilessly. With his escape blocked, Tianzhou had no choice but to fight with Jinshin. As the fire-attributed saint force in his body erupted, the surrounding air rapidly rose and the grass on the ground quickly withered. With a roar, Tianzhou's huge sword was covered in raging flames as it heavily slashed toward Jinshin. Jinshin was not afraid at all as the light wind sword that was only 2 fingers thick collided with the huge sword. Afterwards, Jinshin's arm shook and the light wind sword fiercely slapped against the huge sword. The huge sword rippled to the side as the light wind sword mercilessly pierced through Tianzhou's chest. Blood dripped from the tip of the sword as it pierced through his back. You actually have the strength of an Earth Saint Master. How is this possible? Only now did Tianzhou come to a realization. The Jinshin that he had never placed in his eyes was actually not a great Saint Master, but an Earth Saint Master. No wonder you were able to kill Third Brother so easily. No wonder you were able to catch up to my speed. Tianzhou's face was ashen as he felt a deep sense of regret. If he had known earlier that Jinshin was already an Earth Saint Master, he would never have provoked him. Chapter 304. Tianzhou's eyes twinkled as he stared at Jinshin. You want to kill me? Jinshin sneered. You brought this upon yourself. I have no enmity with you. It was you who tried to make things difficult for me time and time again. You even tried to distort the truth and wanted to kill me. You can't blame me for this. As he spoke, Jinshin slowly pulled out the light wind sword from Tianzhou's chest. As the sword was pulled out, blood began to flow from Tianzhou's wound like a fountain. Jinshin's sword had only pierced through Zhou Tian's chest. It was still 2 inches away from his heart, so even though the sword had pierced through his chest, it wasn't fatal to an expert like Zhou Tian. Knowing that Jinshin was determined to kill him, Tianzhou threw caution to the wind. His face suddenly became serious as he angrily said, You want to kill me? I'll make you pay a heavy price. The huge sword in Tianzhou's hand suddenly began to emit a scorching light. A layer of roaring flames began to burn on the surface of the sword. The surging heat caused the surrounding air to rapidly rise. Some of the tender grass on the ground began to wither at a visible rate. Go dot! Tianzhou suddenly became crazy. The huge sword turned into a fiery red light as it slashed towards Jinshin's head with lightning speed. He knew that with the strange longbow and the yellow-clothed woman beside him, there was no hope for him to escape. Since he was going to die anyway, he might as well drag someone down with him. Even if he couldn't drag someone down with him, he definitely wouldn't let Jinshin have an easy time. There was only a month left until the end of the elimination round. This period of time was the most intense. If Jinshin were to be injured at this time, then even if he was an Earth Saint Master, he might not be able to leave this place safely. As the sword slashed out, a sliver of pressure filled the air, heavily pressing down on Jinshin. It made Jinshin feel as if he was in a quagmire. It was extremely uncomfortable, and his movements were greatly hindered. Tianzhou's seemingly ordinary sword strike carried the might of a battle technique. Jinshin revealed a mocking smile. He had seen many battle techniques, including those that were even more powerful than Tianzhou's tornado-shaped battle technique. He didn't think much of it at all. Unless he had no other choice, Jinshin would not be stupid enough to take the initiative to meet force with force. He was not a strength-type warrior at all. Jinshin's feet slid forward, barely dodging Zhou Tian's giant sword. His light wind sword was as fast as lightning as it pierced towards Tianzhou's throat. By the time Tianzhou regained his senses, the light wind sword was already at his neck. Even if you put your life on the line, you won't be able to change the outcome. You're not my match at all. A faint smile hung at the corner of Jinshin's mouth. However, his gaze was as sharp as a sword as he stared at Tianzhou. He said indifferently, Tianzhou, for the sake of the Tianqin clan, I will allow you to leave behind your last words. You really dare to kill me? Tianzhou roared. His expression had already become extremely ugly. After these few exchanges, he already knew that he was definitely not Jinshin's match. Even if he used a battle technique, he would not be able to defeat this youth in front of him who was at most in his 20s. This made it difficult for him, who had always thought that Jianshun was only a great saint master, to accept this fact. Jianshun coldly snorted and said, "You really think that just because you're a member of the Tianqin clan, I won't dare touch you? I've already endured you for a long time. If you kill me, my Tianqin clan will definitely not let you go." Tianzhou did not reveal the slightest trace of fear. Jianshun's gaze turned cold. With a flick of his wrist, the light wind sword's blade fiercely slapped Tianzhou's face. It was as if he was slapping someone in the face. With a pa sound, the sharp blade cut through the skin on Tianzhou's face, leaving behind 2 faint traces of blood. "You!" Tianzhou was enraged. His eyes seemed as if they were about to spit out flames as he stared at Jianshun. However, he did not dare to act rashly. If looks could kill, then Jianshun would have already been torn to pieces by Tianzhou's venomous gaze. Humiliation. Tianzhou felt the greatest humiliation. As a direct descendant of the Tianqin clan, Tianzhou had an important position in the clan. He was not inferior to even Qin Shao. However, Jianshun's actions were no different from a slap to his own face in Tianzhou's eyes. Tianzhou almost lost control and went berserk. "You what? So what if I kill you? Don't use the Tianqin clan to threaten me. You still don't represent the Tianqin clan. If it wasn't for Brother Qin Zhao's face, then I would have already taught you a lesson back at the Tianqin clan," Jianshun said. Afterwards, he viciously kicked Tianzhou's chest. Whether it was intentional or not, Jianshun's kick just happened to land on the wound he left on Tianzhou's chest. Tianzhou groaned as his body was sent flying through the air by Jianshun's kick. He flew for a distance of 5 or 6 meters before landing heavily on the ground. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face had already become incomparably pale, without a trace of blood. His chest was already bright red. Jianshun quickly walked over with the light wind sword in hand. The light wind sword carried a sharp sword chi as it was aimed at Tianzhou's throat. Just as he was about to stab down, a weak voice suddenly came from behind him. "Jianshun, don't kill him. Can you let him go just this once? He is my uncle after all." Qin Shao had already woken up. He strenuously turned his head to look in Jianshun's direction as he spoke weakly. Jianshun's light wind sword stopped right in front of Tianzhou's face. That bone-chilling coldness had already spread throughout Tianzhou's body, but he still did not reveal the slightest trace of fear. Having been on the battlefield of life and death for so many years, Tianzhou did not know how many life and death situations he had experienced. Death was not something that could bring fear to his heart. Jianshun gritted his teeth as he stared fiercely at Tianzhou like a hungry wolf. In a low voice, he said, "Out of respect for Brother Qin Shao, I will spare your life today." After saying that, Jianshun put away the light wind sword. His eyes inadvertently fell on the interspatial ring on Tianzhou's finger. Without any trace of politeness, he took the ring off and walked over to Qin Shao. Tianzhou's face was gloomy as he crawled up from the ground. His cold gaze lingered on Jianshun's back for a while. Then, without saying a word, he clutched the wound on his chest and turned to leave. His interspatial ring had been taken away by Jianshun. Although he felt extremely humiliated, he did not dare say a single word. A gentleman's revenge was a dish best served cold. As long as he could leave this place alive, he would have a chance to make a comeback. Even the humiliation he had suffered today was not impossible. The bloodied third brother staggered behind Tianzhou as well. His face was sunken, and he could not hide the intense killing intent in his eyes as he stood with his back to Jianshun. Jianshun's footsteps paused as he turned to look at the third brother and said, "Who said you could leave?" With a wave of his sword, a sharp sword chi shot towards the third brother. The third brother had already been heavily injured in the previous battle. Right now, even walking required a lot of effort. He was completely unable to dodge the sword chi and was directly pierced through. The third brother, whose body had already been dyed red with blood, fell straight to the ground. There was already a thumb-sized hole in his neck. Tianzhou's body trembled slightly, but he did not stop moving. He dragged his heavy footsteps as he walked away, disappearing into the distance very quickly. Jianshun arrived in front of Qin Shao and crouched down. He checked his wounds before feeding the other 2 pills that contained radiant saint force into Qin Zhao's mouth. No, Jianshun, 1 more is enough for me. Give the other one to big brother Zithermaster. Qin Shao extended his hand to stop Jianshun from feeding him the other 2 pills. Jianshun nodded and stuffed one of the pills into Qin Zhao's mouth. He then arrived beside the Zithermaster and gave him the last pill. The Zithermaster hesitated slightly before taking the pill from Jianshun and stuffing it into his mouth. He then closed his eyes and began to heal. He was naturally taciturn and rarely took the initiative to speak such useless words. Jianshun arrived in front of the yellow-clothed girl and said indifferently, "I'll have to trouble you to look after the 2 of them. I'll go find some things nearby." The yellow-clothed girl glanced at Jianshun before angrily turning her head away. She did not say anything. Jianshun did not say anything else. He looked around and tapped the ground with the tip of his foot. His body shot off into the distance like an arrow released from a bow. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the mountains. Looking at the mountain where Jianshun had disappeared, the yellow-clothed girl with the golden longbow on her back pouted unhappily. A trace of anger still remained on her beautiful face. Jianshun returned very quickly. He carried a bundle of twigs as thick as a wrist on his back. Jianshun threw the bundle of twigs on the ground, then took out some ropes and a blanket from his space ring and began to get busy. Very soon, a simple stretcher was made. Jianshun placed the stretcher in front of Qin Shao and carefully picked up Qin Zhao's burly body and placed him on the stretcher. Now that half of Qin Zhao's waist had been cut off, he could not even stand up or crawl, let alone walk. He could only be carried on the stretcher. "Brother Jianshun, it's been hard on you." Qin Zhao's eyes were brimming with tears. Jianshun's face turned serious. "Qin Shao, if you treat me as a brother, then don't be so courteous." Qin Shao tightly grasped Jianshun's hand. Although he did not say anything, his heart was filled with gratitude. After putting Qin Shao on the stretcher, Jianshun raised the stretcher with one hand and placed it at shoulder level. He then turned his head to look at the Zithermaster. "Can you still walk?" After the Zithermaster ate the pill that contained the light saint force, the injuries on her body had improved. Although it could not completely heal her, she was much stronger than before. The Zithermaster stood up from the ground with some difficulty. She looked at Jianshun with a complicated gaze and said, "I'm fine. I can't continue fighting, but I can still run. We can't stay here for long. Let's get out of here quickly." Jianshun said. The Zithermaster and the yellow-clothed girl did not have any objections to this suggestion. Immediately, Jianshun took away the space belts of second brother, third brother, and fourth brother and left with them. Boom! Suddenly, a sound came from afar. It was accompanied by a huge energy fluctuation. Jianshun and the others felt the ground shake slightly. Boom, 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 boom. In the distance, the huge sound was mixed with the surging energy fluctuation. The ground was shaking and trembling. Although they were very far away, small cracks appeared on the ground around Jianshun and the others. Jianshun and the others stopped and stared into the distance. Due to a huge hillside blocking their line of sight, they were unable to see the scene in the distance. There are people fighting in the distance. They are very strong. Jianshun's face became serious as he said in a deep voice. As soon as his voice fell, a huge iron seal flew up from the hillside. Just as a corner was revealed, it quickly fell down. Bang! With a dull sound, the ground began to shake violently again. This time, it was even more intense than before. It was as if an earthquake had occurred. "That's the seal of Treasure Mountain." The yellow-clothed girl was shocked. Her face immediately became serious as she said in a deep voice, "The stone statue is definitely fighting with someone. Looking at the power of the seal of Treasure Mountain, the opponent is clearly very strong. Otherwise, there are many people." At this moment, the seal of Treasure Mountain flew up again. Its height was just above the hillside, allowing Jianshun and the others to see it clearly. However, before the seal of Treasure Mountain could fall down, a figure flew up into the sky. He wielded a huge sword and slashed down viciously at the 100-meter-large seal of Treasure Mountain. Boom! It was as if a thunderclap had come from the horizon. It was deafening. Accompanied by a surging energy fluctuation, the 100-meter-large seal of Treasure Mountain actually shook from a slash. It was constantly pushed back. Chapter 305. Jinshin's expression also became serious. He said in a low voice, "It's not appropriate for us to clash with them right now. Let's leave this place quickly." If he didn't have the heavily injured Qin Shao in his hands, Jinshin probably wouldn't be able to resist taking a look out of curiosity. However, in order to ensure the safety of Qin Shao, he had no choice but to temporarily avoid them. Jinshin's left hand carried the stretcher and the yellow-clothed girl as he quickly ran off into the distance. The Zither Master also tightly clenched her teeth and followed closely behind the two of them. The ground trembled violently, and the entire hillside was shaking. Many places had already cracked open, and the sound of intense fighting in the distance was incessant. Just from the sound alone, one could hear the intensity of the battle. A few bolder people were attracted by the sounds and hurried in the direction of the battle. The majority of them had lost their space belts and were carrying large bags on their backs. They were in a sorry state. However, when they saw Jinshin's group carrying the injured, two people who were still in good condition immediately ran towards Jinshin's group. The two people moved extremely quickly and arrived several hundred meters away very quickly. Afterwards, they slowed down and sized up Jinshin's group. When they saw that Jinshin and the yellow-clothed girl were at most 25 years old, their courage couldn't help but increase. One of them loudly shouted, "You guys stop right there." After saying that, the two people quickly approached Jinshin's group. Jinshin's gaze turned cold. However, the yellow-clothed girl's movements were even faster than his. She very decisively took off the golden longbow hanging on her back and directly pulled the bowstring. In an instant, two golden arrows were shot out. The golden arrow was like a rainbow, leaving behind a faint golden tail in the sky. It was like a meteor streaking across the sky, shooting towards the two people at lightning speed. The two people on the other side had already taken out their saint weapons the moment the girl took off her longbow. When the golden arrows shot towards them with lightning speed, the two of them simultaneously brandished their saint weapons and slashed at the arrows with surging saint force. Earth Saint Masters. Jinshin was shocked. As soon as the two people attacked, he knew their strength from the surging saint force. Boom! Boom! Two loud explosions rang out, and the surging energy waves instantly submerged the two of them. The soil on the ground was sent flying, and the weeds and debris flew all over the sky. The two of them were sent flying by the powerful energy shockwaves. While they were in the air, blood spurted out from their mouths uncontrollably. Although the yellow-clothed girl was young, she was decisive in her killing. She didn't look like a young lady who grew up in a greenhouse at all. Instead, she looked more like an iron-blooded warrior who had experienced countless life and death battles. She immediately took a few steps forward. Her white and tender fingers gently plucked the bowstring. She slowly pulled the bowstring back, and a golden arrow formed completely out of energy quickly condensed. Whoosh! Two sharp piercing sounds rang out, and another two golden arrows with long, beautiful tails shot towards the two lying on the ground, piercing through their chests in front of their terrified eyes. The two of them let out miserable cries. A fist-sized hole had already appeared in their chests. The golden arrows had pierced through their bodies, and the remnant energy in their bodies rampaged through their bodies. In the blink of an eye, their internal organs were smashed to pieces. Their miserable cries came to an abrupt end, and they slowly stopped breathing. Just like that, two Earth Saint Masters were slain by the girl with a simple flick of her bowstring. This scene was clearly seen by a few people in the distance. A few people who originally wanted to make things difficult for Jinshin immediately gave up on the thought in fear. Who is that yellow-clothed girl? She's actually so powerful. Those two people were the Earth Saint Masters who stole our entry token, but they were actually killed by her so easily. I think that girl isn't very old. She's so powerful at such a young age. I wonder who will be so lucky in the future to be her husband. Be careful with what you say. If that girl hears you, she'll directly shoot an arrow at us in anger. We'll all be done for then. Yeah, you brat. Be careful of what you say. Be careful of what you say. Don't say anything you shouldn't say. A few people in the distance discussed in low voices as they stared at Jinshin's group. No one dared to approach them anymore. The small incident on the way did not cause much of an obstruction to Jinshin's group. Jinshin carried the stretcher in his left hand as he quickly ran forward. When he arrived in front of the two Earth Saint Masters, he directly bent down and took away their storage items, a space ring and an exquisite high-quality space belt. The yellow-clothed girl watched from the side as Jinshin took away their storage items. She did not say anything as she hung her bow on her back and quickly followed behind Jinshin. The battle with the stone statues lasted for a very long time. Even though Jinshin was already 10 kilometers away, he could still faintly hear the sounds of battle from behind. Jinshin's group did not stop for even a moment. They did not slow down at all as they continued to advance in a straight line. 6 hours later, Jinshin and the girl had left the area and found a cave to rest in. There was still a pile of firewood in the pitch-black cave. Someone lived in this cave not too long ago. Whatever, I'll just take it for myself first. Jinshin muttered to himself before carefully placing the zither and flute on the ground. He gathered the scattered branches that had not yet been completely burned and lit a torch to provide some light. The firewood won't take long. You guys stay in the cave and rest first. I'll go out and find some wood. After saying that, Jinshin turned around and left the cave. He then climbed up a hill at the back of the cave and specifically chose the withered trees to chop down. Just as Jinshin was collecting wood, a series of footsteps entered Jinshin's ears. He did not stop because of this and calmly tied up some of the withered branches on the ground. Soon, two figures appeared before Jinshin's eyes. From their appearance, both of them were over 40 years old. One of them was tall and sturdy, with a bald head. He wore a black vest, with thick and powerful arms exposed. His skin was somewhat dark, and he wore blue trousers and a pair of cloth shoes. The other person had a well-proportioned body. He was neither tall nor short, neither fat nor skinny. He had a common face, and a pair of ordinary eyes would flicker with light from time to time. He wore white robes that were slightly damaged and covered in green spots from traveling through the forest. As Jinshin studied the two of them studied Jinshin as well. When the two of them discovered that Jinshin was only in his 20s, they immediately relaxed. Jinshin only glanced at the two of them before lowering his head and continuing to organize the branches on the ground. He used tree bark as a rope to tie up the bundles of wood before stowing them away in his space ring. Now that Jinshin was an Earth Saint Master, there was no need for him to continue hiding his space ring. With his current strength, he could protect his belongings. As a result, Jinshin had worn the space ring when he was still with the Tianqin clan. When the middle-aged man discovered the space ring on Jinshin's hand, an undetectable light flashed through his eyes, but he did not show it on the surface. The large man took out a jug of alcohol from his space ring and gulped down a few mouthfuls before letting out a carefree sigh. He then said to Jinshin, "Brother, you really are brave. You actually have the guts to participate in the mercenary tournament at such a young age. You really are admirable. Oh, right. What are you going to do with all this wood?" Jinshin raised his head and glanced at the large man again. The large man had a simple and honest appearance and a pair of extremely clear eyes. "I'm obviously going to start a fire with this wood," Jinshin indifferently replied. Very soon, Jinshin had gathered enough wood. He tossed the wood into his space ring and left without looking back. The large man and the middle-aged man remained where they were as they watched Jinshin leave. After quite a while, the middle-aged man slowly said, "This young man is not simple. I also feel that he is not simple. He dares to participate in the mercenary tournament at such a young age. He's much stronger than I was back then. I admire him," the large man chuckled. The middle-aged man sneered, "Doctorin, you can't judge people like that. Did you notice the ring on the young man's hand? That's a space ring." "A space ring." The large man was surprised before dryly laughing. He extended his hand and rubbed his bald head. With a rather awkward expression, he said, "I really didn't notice that." "Yinzheng, You're much better at judging people than I am. But who cares what ring it is? A normal space ring is enough for me. If it really doesn't work, I'll just prepare another one. It's practical and cost-effective and saves money. The middle-aged man didn't continue to speak. He stared at the direction Jianshun left for a moment before leaving with the large man. Jianshun quickly returned to the cave using the original path. He then took out all the firewood from his space ring and piled them up at the edge of the cave. Because Qin Xiao was heavily injured and couldn't move, Jianshun planned to stay in the cave for 10 days to half a month. At the very least, he had to wait for Qin Xiao's injuries to stabilize. Therefore, he collected a lot of firewood, piling them up in a corner. They were all wrist-sized sticks that could burn for a long time. After adding some firewood to the torches, Jianshun took out some healing medicine from Qin Xiao's space ring and applied it to Qin Xiao's wounds. He then used a layer of white gauze to bandage the wounds. The zither master, who was also heavily injured, also took out some healing medicine that she had already prepared and swallowed it. She then sat cross-legged on the ground and closed her eyes to control the medicine in her body to heal her injuries. The yellow-clothed woman sat on a rock in the corner. She took down the longbow on her back and placed it in front of her. She gently stroked it with a focused expression. The entire cave was very quiet. Only the crackling sound of the burning torches could be heard from time to time. At this moment, the sound of footsteps came from outside the cave. Jianshun, who was bandaging Qin Xiao's wounds, immediately stopped what he was doing. He stared at the entrance of the cave with a sharp gaze. He was ready to fight. Although Qin Xiao's injuries had stabilized, he didn't have the slightest bit of fighting strength. His waist was injured, so he couldn't use any strength. He had to protect Qin Xiao. The yellow-clothed woman also slowly raised her head and stared at the entrance of the cave. She couldn't help but tighten her grip on the golden longbow. Although there weren't many people who could threaten them here, a few hours ago, they had discovered Shi Xiangran and a powerhouse who also had a king weapon. They couldn't help but be vigilant. Soon, two figures appeared in front of Jianshun, one in front and one behind. With the help of the firelight, he could clearly see that the person walking in front was a bald man wearing a black vest. The man was tall and sturdy, with a stocky back and a bare waist. A pair of thick and sturdy arms were exposed. Behind the man was a middle-aged man with an average face and a well-proportioned body. They were the two people that Jianshun had met when he went to the mountain to collect firewood. Chapter 306. The eyes of the two immediately fell on the body of the yellow-clothed girl. When the burly man saw the devastatingly beautiful face of the yellow-clothed girl, he was stunned for a moment. But he quickly recovered and revealed a depressed expression. He said, "Little girl, you are really beautiful. I have been walking for 30 years, and I have never seen a girl as beautiful as you. But why did you ask me to go out? This cave was discovered by me. I just left for a while when you came in and occupied my cave. You should be the one to go out." As he spoke, the man glanced around the cave. Very soon, he discovered Jianshun, who he had met not long ago. He was immediately stunned, but then he smiled and said, "What a coincidence. Little brother, we meet again so soon." Jianshun glanced at the man and the middle-aged man behind him. With his sharp intuition and the presence they gave off, he had already deduced that the two of them were Earth Saint Masters. Although less than a tenth of the people on the Tian-Yuan continent could successfully break through to Earth Saint Master, and only 1% of the people who could reach Earth Saint Master before the age of 50, all the people who could participate in the mercenary gathering were the cream of the crop. Even if it was only 1%, Earth Saint Masters was still quite a large number among the several tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people participating in the mercenary gathering. There were at least several hundred to over 1,000 people. Now that the competition had reached its end, the people who were still alive were basically all Earth Saint Masters. Only a small number of Great Saint Masters were Earth Saint Masters, so Jianshun did not find it strange that the two people he had casually met to be Earth Saint Masters. The man did not even wait for Jianshun's reply. He walked to the edge of the cave and sat down with his back against the wall. He chuckled and said to Jianshun, "Little brother, since you've all been injured, I won't chase you away. Let's all stay here together. It's livelier with more people anyway." We can even talk when we're bored. Isn't that great? Yinzheng, don't you think so? The last sentence was said to the middle-aged man who was still standing at the entrance of the cave. The middle-aged man smiled and nodded. Doctor is right. If you don't mind, let's all rest here. If we run into any trouble, we can help each other. After all, there's strength in numbers. With that, the middle-aged man walked over to the man's side and sat down. He casually looked at Jianxun and the others. The yellow-clothed girl's face was still as cold as ice. Her beautiful eyes carried a trace of sharpness as she constantly glanced between the man and the middle-aged man. Although the two of them had shown good intentions, she still did not let down her guard. Jianxun looked at the yellow-clothed girl and slightly hesitated. He then nodded. All right then, we'll all stay in this cave. However, I have to say this first. If anyone dares to do anything to harm us, don't blame me for being merciless. Towards the end, Jianxun's tone became even sharper. A strong killing intent flashed through his eyes. Hearing this, the middle-aged man's face became slightly uncomfortable. He, a mighty Earth Saint Master, was actually being threatened by a brat who was only in his 20s. Anyone would feel slightly displeased. However, the more it was like this, the more the middle-aged man was certain that Jianxun was not ordinary. To be able to last until the end of the elimination round that was filled with slaughter, and to be completely unscathed, coupled with his arrogant tone and attitude of not putting the two of them in his eyes, Jianxun definitely had something to rely on. He was definitely not arrogant and conceited. Perhaps the man did not hear the threat in Jianxun's tone and continued to chuckle. I'm called Doctorin. The person beside me is called Yunzheng. Little brother, what's your name? Seeing that the man was not pretending to be simple and honest, Jianxun immediately concluded that the man was definitely a loyal and honest person. These kinds of people usually did not have many schemes in their minds, so there was no need to be wary of them when interacting with them. With the dusty memories unraveled, Jianxun immediately thought of his own elder brother, Changyanghu and Tai Ta, who he had met in Kargath Academy. These two people's personalities were somewhat similar to the man in front of him. From a certain aspect, they were the same kind of people. As a result, Jianxun's impression of the man called Doctor and immediately improved by a lot. I'm called Jianxun. Jianxun's lips curled into a faint smile as he spoke to Doctor and in a friendly manner. The beautiful eyes of the yellow-clothed girl, sitting in the corner, gazed at the faint smile on Jianxun's face. Her gaze gradually became complicated, but the sharpness in her eyes and the coldness on her face gradually faded away. A rare softness appeared on her face. Because of his genetic inheritance and the body refining technique, Jianxun's appearance was already very handsome. It could be said to be perfect. His smile was even more enchanting. There were not many girls in the world who would not be moved by it. Even the yellow-clothed girl, not far away, stared blankly. However, she quickly recovered and immediately turned her gaze away with a taut face. She no longer stared at Jianxun. Jianxun, I see that you are so young. You must not be more than 25 years old. Doctor said with a serious face. Jianxun chuckled and did not reply, which could be considered as a tacit agreement. Doctor turned his head and looked at the yellow-clothed girl. He continued to ask, Little girl, you are very beautiful. I was almost mesmerized by you just now. What is your name? The yellow-clothed girl coldly snorted. She did not even look at the big man. She slightly raised her head and leaned against the wall behind her. She stared blankly at the dusky cave ceiling. The man smiled awkwardly and looked at Jianxun as if he was asking for help. Doctorin, ignore her. Her temper is not good. Jianxun said with a smile. He did not know the yellow-clothed girl's name. He only heard Shi Xiangran call her Luan, at the beginning. As soon as Jianxun's voice fell, the yellow-clothed girl immediately turned her head. She angrily glared at Jianxun and shouted, You are the one with a bad temper. Doctor secretly glanced at the yellow-clothed girl. He reached out his hand and touched his nose. He thought to himself, It seems that Jianxun was right. Although this little girl looks very fresh, her temper is not ordinary. I cannot offend her. Jianxun's eyebrows slightly wrinkled. His expression was very displeased. His heart moved, and he immediately took out several space belts stained with blood and a space ring. Wow, Jinshin, why do you have so many space belts on you? There's even blood on them. You couldn't have stolen them, right? Dr. En looked at Jinshin with a face full of surprise. He did not cover his mouth. The middle-aged man sitting beside him, Yunjung, also had a face full of surprise. His eyes flashed with an undetectable light. Jinshin did not care about Dr. An's words. He chuckled and said, "It can barely be considered stealing." Then, under the shocked gazes of Dr. An and Yunjung, Jinshin took out all the items from the space belts and space rings. He then sorted them out and counted them. There were a total of 4 purple gold cards, 3 rank 5 monster cores, over 200 rank 4 monster cores, and over 500 rank 3 monster cores. In addition, there was also a small mountain of coins that sparkled with purple light, gold light, and white light. They were all piled up to 3 feet high. Apart from these, there were also over 400 pitch-black competition tokens. Seeing the pile of pitch-black competition tokens, Dr. An's eyes immediately widened. He couldn't help but drool from the corner of his mouth as he muttered, "Wow, so many competition tokens." The middle-aged man sitting beside Dr. An was also moved. His heart began to beat uncontrollably. Jinshin didn't even raise his head as he sorted out the items on the ground. He divided them evenly into 2 parts and put one of them into a space belt. He threw it to the girl and said expressionlessly, "Take it. These things belong to you." The girl in yellow glared fiercely at Jinshin. She grabbed the space belt beside her and took out over 200 competition tokens. She then threw the space belt back to Jinshin and said expressionlessly, "I don't care about those things." Jinshin didn't say another word as he immediately picked up the space belt and put the items inside it on himself. There were 2 purple gold cards, 2 level 5 monster cores, over 100 level 4 monster cores, and a large pile of money. He didn't have as much wealth as the girl in yellow to not care about these things. Dr. An stared dumbfoundedly at the yellow-clothed girl as she threw the belt to Jinshin. He swallowed his saliva with some difficulty and turned his head to look at Jinshin's handsome face. That bald head of his kept banging against the wall behind him. With some regret, he muttered to himself, "Why can't I be a bit younger? Why can't I be a bit more handsome? Only now do I realize that being handsome is actually so popular. Those beautiful girls just took the initiative to give you so many good things." Dr. An sat there muttering to himself as if there was no one around. He didn't notice that when he said this, the chest of a young girl in yellow, sitting on a rock in the corner, rose and fell violently a few times. Her eyes seemed to be about to spit out raging flames as she glared fiercely at Dr. and Yunjung, who was sitting beside Dr. and also stared blankly at the girl in yellow and Jinshin. The girl in yellow's generosity made him feel shocked. 2 purple gold cards, 2 level 5 monster cores, over 100 level 4 monster cores, and a large pile of money were given away so casually. This made him feel a bit of disbelief. This was not a small amount of wealth. Even as an Earth Saint Master, he was moved. Chapter 307. In the blink of an eye, Jinshin's group had already stayed in the cave for 7 days. During this time, Jinshin, Dr. An, and Yunjung got along very well. The yellow-clothed girl was still the same as before, rarely speaking. Even now, Jinshin still didn't know her name. Qin Zhao's injuries had already gradually improved. Although the huge wound on his waist hadn't completely healed, at least it had already formed a scar. With the help of healing medicine, it was believed that he would be able to walk in 10 days to half a month. The Zither Master's injuries had also recovered by 70%. She already possessed a certain amount of battle strength. With her valiant strength, she would be able to fully recover in a few days. In the somewhat dusky cave, the torches that had been burning nonstop for several days slowly flickered. Sitting cross-legged to the side, Jinshin slowly opened his eyes. His gaze swept over the cave. The Zither Master, the yellow-clothed girl, and Dr. An were all sitting cross-legged on the ground cultivating. Qin Zhao was still lying on the stretcher with his eyes closed. It was unknown whether he had fallen asleep or what. Only Yunjung wasn't in the cave, his whereabouts unknown. Jinshin got up to add some wood to the bonfire, then walked out of the cave. When he disappeared from the cave, the yellow-clothed girl, sitting cross-legged on the ground, cultivating slowly, opened her eyes. She looked in the direction Jianshan had left, then closed her eyes again. She sat there motionless like an old monk in meditation. Arriving outside the cave, Jianshan fiercely breathed in the fresh and comfortable air outside. Then, he closed his eyes with an intoxicated expression. After staying in the cave with poor ventilation for so long, the slightly dry and hot air inside had long since made people feel very uncomfortable. Jianshan took a deep breath, then climbed up the hillside in boredom and wandered around nearby. Right now, he had to protect Qin Xiao, so he didn't dare to go far. Moreover, before Qin Xiao's injuries were healed, Jianshan didn't plan to leave this place. This was because bringing Qin Xiao, who was inconvenient to move, on the road would be troublesome if they encounter a strong person. Even if he wasn't afraid, if the opponent targeted Qin Xiao, then Jianshan would fall into a very passive situation. During this period of time, Jianshan had collected quite a few tokens as well. In total, he had over 1,000 tokens. In this elimination round, he only needed to collect the top 500 tokens to pass, so the 1,000 tokens on Jianshan were enough for him to pass. Now, all he needed to do was stay here and endure the remaining month. Jianshan jumped onto a 30-meter tall tree and lay down on a thick branch. He couldn't help but think of Ming Dong, who was staying in the mysterious shrine. He muttered, "I wonder how Ming Dong's situation is now." His ancestor and that mysterious shrine master were very good friends. That shrine master will definitely help Ming Dong. When I see Ming Dong again, he will definitely have changed greatly. This time's mercenary tournament is the easiest way to obtain a heaven tier battle skill. I must do my best and obtain a heaven tier battle skill. Once my strength is enough, I will return to the kingdom of Jessin and settle the debt with the Huayun sect. With the assistance of a heaven tier battle skill, the strength of Chanyang Prefecture will also greatly increase. Jianshan muttered to himself as he lay down on a tree branch, his eyes shining with unprecedented determination. But shortly after, Jianshan let out a long sigh. A trace of worry appeared between his brows as he said, "Right now, the kingdom of Jessin's situation is very bad. The surrounding 4 kingdoms are about to join forces to attack the kingdom of Jessin. I estimate that war will break out in the next 1 or 2 years. In the following period of time, I must work even harder to increase my strength. I hope that when the time comes, I will be able to help a little." Just as Jianshan was laying down on a tree branch and making plans for his future journey, 3 figures were rapidly running in his direction from afar. They were like arrows that had been released from a bow, their speed extremely fast. The 3 people were chasing and fleeing. The person running in front had a pale complexion and was covered in blood. The white robes he wore were mostly dyed red with blood. The 2 people behind him were still fully clothed and were holding saint weapons in their hands as they chased after him. Jianshan also discovered the 3 people in the distance. He gently pushed aside the branches and leaves that were blocking his line of sight. With his outstanding eyesight, he clearly saw the 3 people's appearances. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes as he lightly smiled and said, "I didn't think that he would be in such a sorry state from being chased. It seems that he wants to lead them back to his home." As he spoke, Jianshan jumped down for the tree branch. He calmly stood under the tree and stared at the 3 people approaching in his direction. Of the 3 people, the one running in front was Yun Zheng, who lived in the same cave as Jianshan. At this moment, Yun Zheng was in an extremely sorry state and had long since lost his former elegance. When Yun Zheng discovered Jianshan in front of him, an indescribable light flashed through his eyes. He immediately increased his speed and rapidly approached Jianshan. Very quickly, the pale-faced Yun Zheng stopped by Jianshan's side, panting for breath. He hurriedly said, "Little brother Jianshan, let's go quickly. Those 2 people are very strong. Let's go back and call doctor and deal with them together." Jianshan smiled and shook his head, saying, "My brother is currently recuperating there. I don't want him to be disturbed in the slightest." But Yun Zheng's face was filled with anxiety. Just as he wanted to say something, Jianshan extended a hand to stop him. He indifferently said, "Let's settle it here." Hearing Jinshin's indifferent tone, a light flashed through Yunzhang's eyes. He slowly calmed down and then quietly stood behind Jinshin. He wanted to see just how Jinshan would deal with the two Earth Saint Masters who were even stronger than him. The two Earth Saint Masters chasing after Yunzhang also stopped 10 meters away from Jinshin. The two of them were middle-aged men in their 40s. They wore light blue tight clothes that tightened their firm muscles. One of them was short, only about 5 meters tall. His skin was extremely dark, like coal. The other was skinnier and had an ordinary appearance. He had a hooked nose, and 6 or 7 vicious scars crisscrossed the left side of his face. He looked extremely terrifying, but also added a bit of fierceness to him. The two men sized up Jinshin. They did not place him in their eyes at all. The two of them looked at each other, and then one of them immediately arrived behind Jinshin, blocking off Jinshin and Yunzhang's path of retreat. Jinshin slowly crossed his arms and looked at the short man with a smile. He said, "You two, may I ask what the meaning of this is?" Seeing Jinshin's calm appearance, the short man faintly felt that something was wrong. However, he did not think too much about it. He angrily glared at Jinshin and Yunzhang and yelled, "If you know what's good for you, immediately hand over your space belts and I'll spare your lives. Otherwise, what else can I do?" Jinshin continued to smile. The short man's gaze suddenly became sharp. He viciously glared at Jinshin and angrily yelled, "Otherwise, the two of you will die here today." Jinshin's eyes flashed with a strong killing intent as he said, "Since it's like this, I'll send you on your way." As soon as he finished speaking, Jinshin left behind an afterimage and instantly appeared in front of the short man. At the same time, the silver light wind sword suddenly appeared in his right hand. It carried a powerful and chilling sword chi as it pierced towards the short man. It was as fast as lightning. The short man did not think that Jinshin would suddenly attack. Moreover, his speed was so fast that before he could react, the silver sword had already pierced through his throat. Jinshin's sword was just too fast. The short man was caught off guard and was killed in a single exchange. Even though he was an Earth Saint Master, it was still difficult for him to dodge Jinshin's incomparably fast sword. Jinshin's movements did not stop at all. He immediately pulled out the bloodied sword from the short man's neck. With a slight sway of his body, he turned into a blur as he charged toward the skinny Earth Saint Master behind him. At this time, the Earth Saint Master finally reacted. His eyes were filled with shock as he looked at Jinshin charging towards him. At this moment, his expression became extremely serious. This was because he suddenly realized that the youth he had never placed in his eyes was actually a tiger in sheep's clothing. "Huh!" The skinny man roared as Saint Force surged out from his body. The large sword in his hand was covered in a thick layer of blue light as it mercilessly chopped towards Jinshin's head. Jinshin's body slightly swayed as he nimbly dodged the skinny man's attack. The light wind sword turned into a silver bolt of lightning as it pierced towards the skinny man's throat. The skinny man's reaction wasn't slow either. He tilted his head and narrowly dodged the light wind sword, causing the light wind sword to brush past his neck. However, before the skinny man could even rejoice, the light wind sword that had just brushed past his neck had already sliced horizontally across it. In the next moment, the skinny man felt a slight pain from his neck as the scene in front of him began to spin. His entire head had already been cut off as it spun and fell to the ground. From his severed neck, a 2-meter-tall pillar of blood spurted out. The two arrogant Earth Saint Masters who had beaten Yunzhang into a sorry state had been killed by Jinshin in the blink of an eye. Standing to the side, Yunzhang stared with wide eyes. His face was filled with disbelief. This kind of battle prowess, was it really possible for a youth in his 20s to possess such strength? Standing to the side, Yunzhang had originally planned to watch how Jinshin dealt with the two Earth Saint Masters. Although he had already guessed that Jinshin would be able to deal with the two Earth Saint Masters, he never would have thought that the two Earth Saint Masters who had chased after him would be so weak in front of Jinshin. They were simply unable to withstand a single blow. Chapter 308. After dealing with the two of them, Jinshin went up to the two Earth Saint Masters and removed their space belts. He then rummaged through their bodies, but he didn't find anything of value. Although the two of them were Earth Saint Masters, they still wore space belts instead of space rings. Space rings were extremely precious on the Tian-Yuan continent. They were a symbol of status and strength. Although Earth Saint Masters had the right to wear space rings, not every Earth Saint Master possessed one. Jianshun glanced at Yunzheng, whose clothes were dyed red with blood, and indifferently said, "Let's go back. You should treat your wounds as soon as possible. It's not safe to walk around with wounds." With that, Jianshun left the area and made his way back to the cave. Yunzheng watched Jianshun's figure slowly disappear into the distance. His face was filled with shock, the shock that had yet to recede from his eyes. The scene of Jianshun killing the two Earth Saint Masters had left an indelible impression on Yunzheng. "Sai, is this a legendary genius?" Yunzheng finally sighed after quite a while. He then moved his feet and followed Jianshun back to the cave. When the two of them returned to the cave, Yunzheng's blood-drenched body immediately attracted everyone's attention. Serene, who had the best relationship with Yunzheng, immediately stood up and furiously said, "Yunzheng, which bastard injured you? Tell me, and I'll rip him to shreds." Yunzheng smiled when he sensed the concern in Serene's voice. "I was unlucky. When I was out hunting, I ran into two Earth Saint Masters who were slightly stronger than me. Fortunately, I ran into little brother Jianshun. The two of them were killed in a single clash by little brother Jianshun." A gleam of light flashed through Qin Zhao's eyes when he heard what Yunzheng had said. He stared at Jianshun in pleasant surprise, but there was also some doubt and disbelief. He asked, "Jianshun, is he telling the truth? What did you do to two Earth Saint Masters with just a picture?" Qin Zhao's voice was filled with anticipation. The Zither Master was sitting to the side with her eyes closed. Her ears twitched slightly, but she didn't open her eyes. Jianshun nodded slightly and did not deny it. Qin Zhao's face was filled with unconcealable joy. He excitedly said, "Jianshun, when did you become so powerful? Although I felt that you were very powerful when we fought, I felt that you couldn't easily kill an Earth Saint Master. That's because I had successfully broken through to Earth Saint Master in just a dozen or so days after leaving the Tianqin clan," said Jianshun. Hearing these words, the Zither Master's tightly closed eyes suddenly opened. Her gaze was filled with astonishment as she looked at Jianshun. Then, she closed her eyes and remained motionless like a stone statue. "I see." Qin Zhao was enlightened. Time passed by quickly. In the blink of an eye, there was only half a month left until the end of the elimination round. During this half a month, Jianshun rarely went out. He spent most of his time in the cave, silently guarding Qin Zhao. The yellow-clothed girl had used the sun-moon bow to carve out another cave half a month ago. She lived there alone and silently cultivated. On the other hand, Yunzheng and Dr. went out every day. Many times they would drag their injured bodies back. There were even a few times when they were chased to their home by several powerful Earth Saint Masters, but it was Jianshun who helped them deal with them. The great battle prowess that Jianshun had displayed had deeply impressed Dr. and Yunzheng. They were all Earth Saint Masters, but the difference between them was like heaven and earth. The second and third cycle Earth Saint Masters were not Jianshun's opponent at all. As time passed, Dr. and Yunzheng unknowingly began to treat Jianshun as their pillar of support. After so many days of rest, Qin Zhao's injuries had completely healed. Perhaps it was because of Jianshun's stimulation, but after recovering, Qin Zhao focused all of his attention on cultivation. He used the power of the monster cores to increase his strength, striving to reach the Earth Saint Master level as soon as possible. The Zither Master, who had long since recovered from her injuries, was the same. Her words were as precious as gold. Ever since she had met Jianshun, she had never spoken more than 10 sentences. She was even more taciturn than Katafi, whom Jianshun had met in Wake City. In the dim cave, only the flickering flames of the bonfire illuminated the entire cave. The light flickered and flickered. Jianshun sat cross-legged in a corner, a Class 5 monster core in his hand. He constantly absorbed the energy within to cultivate. Now that the kingdom of Jessen was in great danger, the Chang'an prefecture would not be spared either. He urgently needed to increase his strength and could not waste a single bit of his free time. The entire gloomy cave was affected by their cultivation. The energy that leaked out from time to time gathered in the cave, turning this very ordinary cave into a paradise. At this moment, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard from outside. Jinshin's ears twitched slightly as he cultivated, but he did not make any movements. The footsteps quickly approached as Dr. In and Yunjung walked in from outside. Jinshin, good news, good news. I just heard some rumors outside. It said that in the southernmost forest, there is an expert's cultivation cave. There are countless treasures inside, and there is at least one heaven-tier battle skill. Dr. In said eagerly, his expression incomparably excited. When they heard about a heaven-tier battle skill, the people cultivating in the cave all opened their eyes. Although they were all cultivating, they were all vigilant towards the outside world in this place. Nothing that happened outside could escape their senses. Qin Zhao's eyes widened as he said in shock, "Heaven-tier battle skill? Is what you said true? Could it be that someone deliberately spread fake news and then set up a huge trap there, waiting for people to take the bait?" Dr. In shook his head and said, "I don't know about that, but there are already many people rushing there. It's said that even the 5 great experts have gone there." 5 great experts? What 5 great experts? Qin Zhao asked doubtfully. The 5 great experts are the most famous people recently. At the same time, they're also the most powerful people. This news only spread recently, and now there's practically no one who doesn't know about them. The one who spoke this time was Yunjung. He couldn't help glancing at Jinshin. He didn't know who was stronger between Jinshin and the 5 great experts. Jinshin's heart trembled as he asked, "Then what are the 5 great experts called?" "They are called Qinji, Dugufeng, Timuling, Shi Xiangran, Jetta Wukong," Yunjung said. Jinshan frowned slightly and muttered in a low voice, "I didn't expect him to rely on 2 treasures to become one of the 5 great experts." "Jinshin, do you think we should go or not?" Qin Zhao looked at Jinshin. Clearly, he wanted Jinshin to make the decision. Jinshin muttered to himself and said, "Of course we should go." After saying that, Jinshin stood up and said, "There is no time to lose. Let's go now. In any case, there are only 15 days until the end of the competition." Afterwards, Jinshan led Senior In, Yunjung, Qin Zhao, and the Zither Master out of the cave at the same time. Coincidentally, the yellow-clothed girl with the golden longbow on her back also happened to walk out of the cave she had dug. "I heard that a heaven-tier battle skill will appear in the south. We plan to go take a look. Are you coming?" Jinshin expressionlessly asked the yellow-clothed girl. The yellow-clothed girl's beautiful eyes paused on Jinshin's face for a moment. In the end, she nodded slightly and didn't say anything. "This time, we might meet an old friend. Be prepared," Jinshan said. Then, Jinshin's group of 6 left the cave and quickly headed south. Along the way, Jinshin also discovered that quite a few people were heading south. Along the way, they could hear about the heaven-tier battle skill and the cultivation caves left behind by seniors. All sorts of discussions followed. Almost all of these people were great Saint Masters. Without exception, they all carried bags of various sizes. Their space belts had already been taken away, so the bags only contained some clothes and food. As for these people who had already lost their tokens, the Earth Saint Masters would not make things difficult for them unless there was some deep hatred between them. As a result, these people who were only great Saint Masters did not have the slightest fear as they walked on the road. Along the way, they would occasionally meet a few enemies who would come to blows. However, this didn't affect Jinshin's group in the slightest. The people who were able to survive until now were extremely clever. When they saw Jinshin's group swagger on the road with their space belts, they couldn't help but guess that Jinshin's group was definitely an extremely powerful group. After 5 days of hurrying, Jinshin's group finally arrived at a lush forest. The number of participants carrying bags of various sizes gradually increased, and the information they heard became more accurate. I heard that there are quite a few powerful magical beasts guarding the cave. 3 of the 5 experts and over 30 Earth Saint Masters fought with them many times, but they all helplessly retreated. They were unable to approach the cave at all. Yeah, I heard that quite a few Earth Saint Masters have died in these battles. Only the 3 supreme experts of the 5 great experts are unscathed, Jinshin said. The magical beasts guarding the cave are just too powerful. If this continues, I'm afraid that they won't be able to enter the cave even when the competition ends. Chapter 309. When Jinshin's group approached this place, the information that was being spread became more consistent and more accurate. Now, Jinshin was more or less certain. Although he didn't know if there was a heaven-tier battle skill in the cave, he had at least confirmed the existence of the cave. Jinshin didn't stay there and continued to lead the group into the forest. From the information he had heard, he basically knew that the location of the cave was in the depths of the dense forest. Because there were many people going in and out of this place in the past few days, a few flat paths had been created in the dense forest. Jinshin followed the people in front and walked for 4 hours before finally arriving at a flat and spacious area that had been excavated by hand. There were already quite a number of people gathered here. There were about 300 people gathered in groups of 3 to 5. There were more than a dozen tents on the ground. From the wide, open tent doors, one could clearly see a few people lying inside and resting. There were also many people sitting on the surrounding tall tree trunks. Some were drinking, some were eating, and some were resting on top of the tree trunks. There were quite a few Earth Saint Masters among these people, no less than 40 in total. The rest were Great Saint Masters with bags on their backs. Only an extremely small number of Great Saint Masters still had their space belts. The people here seemed to have secretly reached some kind of agreement. They didn't fight with each other or fight for the entry token. Instead, they gathered together very peacefully and didn't offend each other. Let's go ahead and take a look, Jinshin softly said to the people beside him before continuing forward. Jinshin's group attracted quite a few people's attention. Everyone's gazes were cast on this group of people who were wearing bright clothes, but no one went up to make things difficult for Jinshin's group. This was because a few people who weren't weak had already sensed that there were 3 Earth Saint Masters in this group. Unless there was a conflict of interest, no one wanted to offend 3 Earth Saint Masters walking together for no reason. When Jinshin's group of 6 had walked 5 kilometers forward, a loud beast roar suddenly rang out. Immediately afterwards, an unimaginably powerful energy fluctuation followed, causing the ground to violently tremble. Countless towering trees could be faintly seen being uprooted by the surging energy fluctuation, flying high into the sky. In front of them, through the gaps in the dense forest, they could faintly see a few huge creatures rapidly running over. Their huge auras were faintly transmitted, causing Jinshin's group to almost be unable to breathe. Jinshin's expression suddenly changed. He extended his hand to pull the people behind him and said, "Retreat, quickly retreat." Without any hesitation, they immediately retreated back along the path they had come from. Very soon, they returned to the open space in the forest that had been excavated. Just as Jinshin's group returned, a group of people in tattered clothes walked over from where Jinshin's group had retreated. There were a total of 12 people in this group. One of them was a young man who seemed to be around 27 or 28 years old, around the same age as Ming Dong. The young man wore light blue clothes and was very handsome. He carried a 2-meter-long, fiery red greatsword on his back. The greatsword was a head taller than the young man. There were also 4 people around the age of 30. All of them had outstanding appearances. The rest of them were middle-aged men in their 40s. They all had resolute expressions on their faces. In this group of people, there were a few middle-aged men with blood at the corner of their mouths. Their faces were sickly pale. Clearly, they had suffered heavy injuries. The return of this group of people attracted the gazes of everyone present. The gazes of over 300 people all landed on this group of people. A while later, a buzzing sound of discussion rang out. "Looks like they failed again. Sigh, the magical beasts guarding the dwelling are just too powerful. How can a magical beast guarding the dwelling be so easy to deal with? Unless the 5 great experts gather and all of us Earth Saint Masters work together, we'll only be able to suppress the powerful magical beasts." They're just wasting their efforts like this. Let's just wait. The magical beasts guarding the dwelling are unimaginably powerful. They've probably reached Class 6. Only when the 5 great experts gather and work together can we defeat the magical beasts. What a pity. The 5 great experts are all Earth Saint Masters. If there was a Heaven Saint Master, it would be much easier to enter the dwelling. Looking at the long sword on the back of the young man, a gleam of light flashed through the eyes of the girl in yellow. She softly said, "That's a ruler armament." Jianchen was slightly surprised. His gaze immediately landed on the young man with the sword on his back. His expression gradually became serious. He had already seen the power of a ruler armament. It was a saint weapon left behind by a fallen saint ruler. It was so powerful that even Heaven Saint Masters would tremble in fear. However, not everyone could use the full power of a ruler armament. An Earth Saint Master could only use 20% of the ruler armament's power. Even so, it was still extremely terrifying. Jianchen clearly remembered that a few days ago, there was a huge sword that emitted flames that illuminated the horizon that suppressed Shi Xiangran's seal of Treasure Mountain. That battle had attracted many people to watch, but no one knew how it ended. Could this young man be the one who fought with Shi Xiangran? Jianchen secretly guessed. The 12 people who returned did not say anything. They walked into several large tents to rest and disappeared from everyone's sight. The magical beast up ahead is very powerful. Let's wait here for a while. When there are more people here, we'll follow them and take a look, Jianchen said to the people beside him. Afterward, they each found a spacious area and began to set up their tents. Very soon, 6 tents were set up. Hey, you guys. Who allowed you to set up tents here? Hurry up and tear them down. Hurry up and tear them down. A man around 30 years old walked over from the distance. He angrily stared at Jianchen's group and loudly shouted. This person was skinny and wore white clothes. He had an arrogant expression on his face, and there were 3 eye-catching claw marks on his forehead. Everyone's gazes were immediately drawn over. Many people showed a trace of schadenfreude on their faces. These people definitely don't know the rules here. Can't they see that so many of us don't dare to set up tents here? They actually set up a tent each, taking up a large piece of the originally small space. A burly man who sat on a tree trunk and drank muttered to himself. They've all just arrived here. It looks like they don't know the rules here. Sigh, why aren't they smarter? Can't they see that there are so many of us here, but there are only a dozen tents? Not just anyone can set up a tent here. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man sitting under a tree. The skinny man wearing white clothes had already arrived in front of Jianchen's group. Seeing that Jianchen had no intention of tearing down the tents, he couldn't help but become angry and said, "Didn't you hear me? I told you to tear down the tents right now." Saying that, the youth kicked the Zither Master's tent away. Then, without stopping, he continued to approach Jianchen's tent and kicked out again, attempting to send Jianchen's tent flying. Jianchen's eyes flashed with a strong, killing intent. The light wind sword appeared in his right hand, and with a flash of silver light, the light wind sword cut through the skinny man's leg with lightning speed. Ah! The skinny man let out a blood-curdling scream. The leg that he had used to kick Jianchen's tent had been cut off, causing blood to flow out. Jianchen withdrew his light wind sword and kicked the skinny man in the chest, sending him flying 10 meters away. Finally, the skinny man fell to the ground and rolled a few times. The skinny man's endurance was obviously very weak. The pain from his leg being cut off caused him to let out a miserable scream. His expression was one of extreme pain. The surrounding people's faces changed as they stared in disbelief at Jianchen's 20-year-old face. The scene in front of them was really out of their expectations. A middle-aged man wearing a purple robe walked out from one of the tents. This man was one of the 12 people who had just returned from the depths of the forest. When the purple-robed man walked out of the tent and saw the skinny man whose leg had been cut off, his eyes flashed with a light that was hard to detect. Then, he looked around and said, "What happened here?" The purple-robed man's voice was very calm, as if he was just casually asking a question. At this time, the other tents were also opened and several figures walked out. They were all the people who had just returned from the depths of the forest. The skinny man's scream had caused quite a commotion. "Jesse, who injured you?" A cry of alarm suddenly sounded out as a middle-aged man with a knife scar on his face walked over to the skinny man whose leg had been cut off by Jinshin. His face was filled with anger. "Big brother, it was him. He cut off my leg. My leg. Big brother, you have to help me kill him." The skinny man's face was filled with hatred as he pointed at Jinshin. The pain had already caused his facial muscles to contort, making him look extremely fierce. The middle-aged man with a knife scar gloomily stared at Jinshin. He slowly stood up and condensed a 3-meter-long red spear in his hand. Then, without saying a word, he rushed towards Jinshin. As the spear danced in the air, it brought with it a wave of heat as it pierced towards Jinshin. A sharp light flashed in Jinshin's eyes as the light wind sword collided with the spear. The resulting shockwave from the collision was so strong that the ground within a 10-meter radius was pushed down by a meter. Chapter 310. Jinshin's light wind sword pierced out like a bolt of lightning. One after another, sword shadows flashed in the air, covering the scar-faced man in a sea of sword shadows. The clanging sounds of weapons colliding rang out endlessly, and the surging waves of energy had long since destroyed the area around the scar-faced man. "This brat is not weak. He can actually match Jigu." Seeing Jinshin and the scar-faced man fight, the young man with the fiery red sword muttered to himself. His voice was filled with surprise. This young man is not simple. At such a young age, he can rely on his own strength to match Jigu. Furthermore, he is not at a disadvantage at all. His talent is just too terrifying. In the future, when he truly matures, he will definitely become a famous figure. "Young master, do you think we should try to rope him in?" Beside the young man with the fiery red sword on his back, a middle-aged man in a purple robe softly asked. The young man with the sword on his back had a trace of killing intent in his eyes as he said, "With his strength, he will definitely be able to obtain first place in the mercenary tournament. He is destined to be my opponent." Hearing this, the middle-aged man in purple robes understood what the young master was thinking and did not say anything else. On the other side, a man in his 30s, wearing a white robe embroidered with gold, stood there with his arms crossed as he watched the fight. He slowly said, "Looks like Jed Wukong's people have provoked a strong opponent. I didn't expect him to be so young. Yes, this brat's strength is not bad. He is actually able to match Jigu. If his strength is limited to this, then he is destined to die. Jed Wukong's strength may not be as strong as Jigu, but he has a king armament. Unless he meets someone who also has a king armament, no one will be his opponent. That is, unless there's a Heaven Saint Master here." A middle-aged man beside the white-robed man softly said, "Looks like this young man is destined to die here. With Jed Wukong's personality, he will definitely not allow anyone who dares to challenge him to live." The white-robed man said, "That may not be the case. Young Master Qinji, do you see the girl in yellow behind them?" The middle-aged man standing beside the young man with the sword on his back said with a smile. Hearing this, the young man who was called Young Master Qinji immediately looked over. As soon as he saw the girl, he could not move his eyes away. He absent-mindedly said, "What a beautiful girl. Her face is as cold as ice, and her eyes are calm and cold. She is definitely not a simple girl." The middle-aged man smiled and continued to say, "Young Master Qinji, look at the golden bow on her back." Qinji's gaze immediately moved away from the yellow-clothed girl's face and landed on the longbow on her back, but he couldn't see anything. The middle-aged man said, "Although I don't recognize that bow, I'm certain it's not an ordinary item. It's also not that woman's saint weapon because I can't sense any saint force ripples from it. So I'm guessing that the bow is probably second uncle. Could that bow be?" Qinji's face was full of surprise. "I'm not sure." The middle-aged man shook his head. 3 divine spear styles. First form, spear shadow layer. A loud shout came from the middle of the battlefield. The middle-aged man's spear turned into a sky full of spear shadows, covering the sky as it pierced towards Jinshin. The spear shadows were so dense that it was impossible to tell which one was real and which one was fake. At the same time, there was also a pressure that seemed to come from the weapon. This scene was exactly the same as when Jianshun used his sword. That's an Earth-class battle skill. In the distance, someone cried out in alarm. An Earth-class battle skill, that's second only to a Heaven-class battle skill. I never thought that I would be able to see it with my own eyes today. I heard that when a Heaven-class battle skill is used, the wind would surge and the clouds would surge. I wonder how strong an Earth-class battle skill is. The corners of Chin's mouth curled up into a sneer as he closed his eyes. His right hand quickly danced as the light wind sword turned into a sky full of sword images, piling on top of each other as they rushed towards the incoming spear images. Ding, 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 ding. Following a series of sounds, Jianshin and the middle-aged man had already exchanged over 100 blows in a single breath's time. The two-'s speed was so fast that it was impossible to see with the naked eye. The only difference was that the middle-aged man was using a battle skill to increase his speed, while Jianshin was relying on his own sword. What speed? In the distance, the young man with the fiery red greatsword on his back exclaimed. His sword is too fast. Even I can't see it clearly. I can only rely on my intuition to catch it. The purple-robed man beside him also exclaimed. What a fast sword. Just how does he have such speed? He's actually able to match Zhigu's battle skill. Qinji also exclaimed. I'm also very curious. Even a wind-attributed Earth Saint Master who has reached the 6th cycle would find it difficult to achieve such speed. But he clearly doesn't have any wind-attributed Saint Force. Yet he can do it so easily. This is just too shocking. Just how is his arm supporting him? 3 Divine Spear Styles, second form, Divine Dragon Tail Whip. The fiery red spear carried with it a fiery glow as it shot down towards Jianshin. At the same time, an even more powerful pressure filled the air. It was as if a boulder was pressing down on Jianshin's body, making it difficult for Jianshin to even move. Jianshin was not afraid in the slightest. Raising his light wind sword, he met the incoming spear head-on. Boom! A violent explosion rang out as the shockwave from the collision engulfed Jianshin. Jianshin's right arm trembled as he was pushed back a dozen meters. Between his legs, a 3-inch wide trench was formed. Even though they were both Earth-tier battle skills, the difference in power between the first and second forms was enormous. The third form, Divine Spear, breaks all laws. Just as Jianshin was about to stabilize himself, Zhigu's voice rang out again. Following that, a fiery red light suddenly appeared in Jianshin's line of sight and quickly grew larger. The sharp tip of the spear brought with it an extremely compressed energy as it closed in on him. Facing this spear, Jianshin felt as if he could not dodge it. It was as if the spear had already locked onto his battle skill, and the only way to deal with it was to meet it head-on. Jianshin slowly closed his eyes as he used his heart to sense Zhigu's exact location. At the same time, his spirit and the light wind sword in his hand formed an inseparable connection. The light wind sword began to emit a cold aura as it shot out, completely enveloping the light wind sword. In the next moment, a silver light flashed as the light wind sword left Jianshin's hand and shot forward at an unbelievable speed. Boom! A violent explosion rang out. The extremely compressed and violent energy at the tip of the spear lost its balance and exploded in midair. It was like a beautiful flower that was in full bloom. The red light that was constantly expanding and spreading in all directions was very eye-catching. The earth on the ground was sent flying as waves after waves of powerful energy spread out in all directions. The surrounding people were forced to retreat again and again until they were already 100 meters away. Both Jianshin and Zhigu had already been submerged by the powerful energy waves. After a while, when the energy waves dissipated, Jianshin and Zhigu's bodies appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Both of them looked perfectly fine, except for the fact that their clothes were a bit messy due to the energy waves. Jianshin's long hair had already broken free from its restraints and was fluttering wildly behind his head. In his right hand, he was still holding his 2-finger-wide and 4-foot-long silver-white sword. On the other side, Zhigu was still in his spear-holding position. His body was still in a running posture as if he was frozen in place. His hair that originally reached his waist had already been cut off from his head, leaving only the part above his neck that was still there. Suddenly, a drop of blood appeared on Jagu's neck and quickly spread out in a straight line. In the blink of an eye, Jagu's neck looked as if he was wearing a red necklace. In the next moment, Jagu's head fell from his neck. There was an uproar from the crowd. Everyone stared at the scene in front of them in disbelief. Their eyes were filled with shock. In that moment, none of them knew what had happened. In their minds, after Jagu used the last move of his Earth Tier battle skill, Jinshin would at least be heavily injured if not killed. But they never thought that the final result would be so dramatic. Jinshin was standing there unscathed after being hit by the Earth Tier battle skill, while Jagu's head was mysteriously cut off. How did Jagu die? Just what happened in that moment? Everyone was very puzzled, and such thoughts kept circling in their minds. How dare you kill a member of my Jita clan? Die. After a moment of silence, a furious roar suddenly rang out. A young man of about 30 years of age charged towards Jinshin with a 1-meter-long sword in his hand. The sword emitted a surge of saint force that caused everyone's expression to change. What a powerful energy wave! Is he a Heaven's Saint Master? A few of the Earth's Saint Masters who thought they were not weak were shocked. Jinshin's expression also became serious. The sword in the young man's hand was actually a king weapon. In this place, he actually saw 2 king weapons, and both of them were of the fire attribute. Die. The young man stared at Jinshin and swung his king weapon down. Chapter 3:11. The golden light collided with the ruler armament in the young man's hand, resulting in a deafening sound. An even more powerful ripple of energy formed a visible shockwave that expanded in all directions, causing those great Saint Masters 100 meters away to be thrown off their feet. Only Earth Saint Masters were able to stabilize themselves in front of this terrifying ripple of energy. The golden radiance dispelled the heaven-shaking attack of the king armament. Furthermore, the intense energy shockwave that erupted from the golden radiance pushed the young man back by more than 10 steps. When he regained his footing, his face was already somewhat pale. Ruler weapons were extremely powerful. Even Earth Saint Masters would be affected by the ripple of energy from the collision of 2 ruler weapons. The previous explosion had happened right in front of the young man's eyes, and the ripple of energy had already caused him to be slightly injured. This was because he was not very powerful. If he abandoned his ruler weapon, he would not even be as powerful as Jagu. The gaze of the youth holding the ruler's armament fell on the body of the yellow-clothed girl who was still shooting arrows not far away. He said one word at a time, "The king's weapon." The girl in yellow did not reply. She slowly put down the golden bow, but her left hand was still tightly holding the bow, ready to shoot a second arrow at any time. I never thought that another ruler weapon would appear, and it would be a longbow. The man with the 2-meter-long fiery red sword on his back exclaimed. He was extremely surprised by the appearance of a ruler weapon. Shinji, who was standing in the distance, let out a long sigh. His gaze immediately became complicated. He said in a low voice, "Second uncle, you actually guessed correctly. It really is a ruler weapon." The middle-aged man standing beside Shinji smiled and said, "I really never thought that another ruler weapon would appear. It really is unexpected. Now that we have 6 ruler weapons, we have a greater chance of defeating the magical beasts ahead. It's just a pity that Jagu is dead. We have lost a great help." Shinji chuckled and said, "Second uncle, although Jagu is dead, there is someone who is even more powerful than him. Overall, their strength has not decreased. Instead, it has increased." That's right. The appearance of the Sun Moon Bao made the young man who wanted to avenge Jagu hesitate. He stood there with a gloomy face and said, "Who are you? And who are you?" Jinshin said expressionlessly. Although he was very afraid of the king weapon, he did not show any fear. The young man glanced at Jinshin with disdain. Finally, he looked at the girl in yellow and said proudly, "I am Jid Wukong." In this trial space, Jed Wukong's name was known to almost everyone. He was one of the 5 great masters. Jinshin saw the disdain in Jed Wukong's eyes and sneered. "So, you are Jed Wukong. You are just SOSO. If you throw away your weapon, you're not even as good as the person who just died at my hands. You are courting death. Jinshin's words seemed to have touched Jed Wukong's bottom line, and he was enraged. He raised his king weapon and tried to slash at Jinshin, but just as he was about to raise his weapon, he stopped. He saw that the girl in yellow had drawn her sun-moon bow to its fullest, and a golden energy arrow was already aimed at him. Jed Wukong's face turned green, then white. Although they were both king weapons, the bow had an innate advantage in terms of long range. If the arrow was shot at him, even if he could successfully block it with his king weapon, the intense energy explosion would cause him to suffer for a while. To him, this was definitely a thankless task. The one who would suffer would definitely be him, because the golden arrow was simply too fast. He simply couldn't dodge it. For a moment, Jed Wukong was caught in a dilemma. Just as Jed Wukong was in a dilemma, a bell-like laughter sounded from afar. Kikik, why is this place so lively? Who is fighting here? They actually made such a big commotion. I can feel the earth shaking from far away. This little girl is so scared that her face turned pale. Following the voice, a girl in a pink dress slowly walked over from afar. Beside her, there were two expressionless middle-aged men. This was a mature woman. She looked to be about 25 or 26 years old. Her entire body exuded an endless charm, as if every movement of hers had a charm that could captivate people's souls. Although the appearance of the woman in the red dress couldn't be said to be devastatingly beautiful, she was still a rare beauty in this world. Coupled with the charm emitted from her body, she was even more lethal than the devastatingly beautiful woman in yellow. She gave people an intense desire to conquer her. This little girl is from the Tiemu clan. My name is Lingzi. This is my first time here. Big brothers, please take care of me. The red-dressed girl giggled. Just this clear voice seemed to have an invisible magic, causing some people who were not firm in their hearts to gradually lose their focus. Tiemu Ling, could she be one of the 5 great experts, Tiemu Ling? Someone exclaimed. There is almost no one who did not know the names of the 5 great experts, but there were not many who had personally seen them. Everyone immediately cast strange gazes at Tiemu Ling. Many of them were secretly surprised. They never thought that Tiemu Ling, one of the 5 great experts, would be such a charming girl. At the same time, she also had a bit of licentiousness. Tiemu Ling's gaze slowly looked around and finally landed on Jed Wukong, who was in a dilemma. She chuckled and said, "This little brother is so mighty. The sword in your hand must be an incredible saint weapon, right? It's actually emitting a terrifying aura that makes even this little girl feel apprehensive." As she said that, Tiemu Ling put on a very frightened expression and pretended to be very pitiful. Jed Wukong awkwardly smiled and used this opportunity to find a way out. He slowly put down the ruler weapon in his hand and proudly said, "This one is Jed Wukong. This saint weapon is the treasure of our Jed clan. It is said that it has been passed down from generation to generation. It is extremely powerful. If a 6th-cycle Earth Saint Master were to wield this sword, they would be able to kill a Heaven Saint Master. Wow, it really is powerful." Tiemu Ling's face was filled with shock. Her white and tender fingers lightly covered her small mouth. When Jed Wukong saw her expression, he became even more complacent. I wonder how these little brothers and big brothers are called. Tiemu Ling looked at the remaining people. Her gaze landed on almost all of them with authority. This one is Qin Ji. A young man in a white robe with golden embroidery cupped his hands and said with a warm smile on his face, "This one is Dugu Feng." The young man with a fiery red sword on his back also cupped his hands and said coldly, "Wow, Qin Ji, Dugu Feng, Jed Wukong, your names are like thunder to this little girl's ears. I didn't expect that 3 of the legendary 5 masters would appear in front of this little girl's eyes. The 3 of you are so handsome that this little girl's heart is beating fast." Tiemu Ling was like an 18-year-old lively girl. Her face was filled with infatuation as if she had seen her idols. Her eyes were filled with little stars. "This little sister, how should I address you? Can you tell me?" Tiemu Ling looked at the yellow-clothed girl and giggled. "Humph. The yellow-clothed girl coldly snorted and turned her head away in disgust. Tiemu Ling didn't care. She still had a charming smile on her face as she looked at Jianshan and said, "This little brother can't be the last of the 5, Shi Xiangran, right? This one is Jianshan." "I'm not Shi Xiangran," Jianshan said expressionlessly. Tiemu Ling's face revealed a trace of surprise, but it quickly disappeared. She giggled and said, "Little brother Jianshan, you're so handsome. You've mesmerized this little girl. You have to take responsibility." Hearing this, even though he knew that Tiemu Ling was acting, Jianshan still felt cold sweat on his forehead. "Pervert!" The yellow-clothed girl gritted her teeth and spat out. "Oh, this little sister can't be jealous, right?" Tiemu Ling giggled as she stared at the yellow-clothed girl. She didn't care about the pervert's insults. The yellow-clothed girl's devastatingly beautiful face immediately turned red from anger. Her chest violently heaved up and down as she angrily glared at Tiemu Ling. She puffed up her cheeks and shouted, "Don't talk nonsense. Io, little sister's temper is quite big. That's not good. Girls should be a bit more gentle so that men will like them," Tiemu Ling said with a smile. The yellow-clothed girl was so angry that she couldn't say anything. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps could be heard from afar. A 27 or 28-year-old youth wearing white clothes could be seen walking over. Jianshan quickly discovered the person who had come. When he saw the person's appearance, his eyes immediately became sharp. This person was actually Shi Xiangran. The difference between him and the other experts was that, including Tiemu Ling, they all had quite a few strong people by their side. However, Shi Xiangran, who was also one of the 5 experts, was actually alone. Shi Xiangran didn't notice Jianshan, but he immediately saw the brightly dressed yellow-clothed girl standing in the crowd. His expression immediately changed. Jianshan's light wind sword immediately appeared in his hand. At this moment, he didn't care about revealing the secret of using the sword. The light wind sword left Jianshan's hand and turned into a silver light that shot towards Shi Xiangran's throat at an unbelievable speed. He had to kill Shi Xiangran before he activated his barrier. Otherwise, once Shi Xiangran activated his barrier, he would be in an invincible position. Even a king weapon wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Although Shi Xiangran didn't notice Jianshan, he saw the yellow-clothed girl at the same time as Jianshan did. He knew that the yellow-clothed girl's Sun Moon Bow was very powerful, so he didn't hesitate to activate his barrier. Just as the light wind sword was about to hit Shi Xiangran's throat, a transparent barrier was quietly released from Shi Xiangran's body. Oh! As soon as the barrier was released, it began to tremble. The light wind sword had already reached Shi Xiangran's throat, but before it could penetrate any further, it was bounced back by the barrier. Jianshan's eyes flashed, and the light wind sword suddenly shot out an even more powerful sword chi. Unwilling to give up, he once again fiercely stabbed towards Shi Xiangran's throat. The barrier around Shi Xiangran's body trembled a few times. Its defensive power was incomparably strong, and Jianshan's light wind sword was unable to break through it. As the barrier continued to expand, the light wind sword was pushed further and further away from Shi Xiangran. Jianshan let out a disappointed sigh as he helplessly recalled his light wind sword. Just a moment ago, he had been so close to killing Shi Xiangran. Seeing the light wind sword bounce back, Shi Xiangran's face became very ugly. He didn't even know when the light wind sword had gotten close to him. He immediately reached out to touch his neck and saw a drop of blood on his finger. Chapter 312. This chapter was supposed to be updated last night, but due to the rain and thunder last night, the internet was disconnected, so it could not be updated in time. Shi Xiangran's face turned pale, without a trace of blood, and cold sweat flowed down his forehead. Only now did he realize that he had just walked through the gates of hell and almost fell into it. Anger rose from Shi Xiangran's heart, and he stared at Jianshan with resentment. The intense killing intent in his eyes was undisguised. Just now, if he had been a little slower in opening the barrier, he would have been a corpse now. Moreover, he would have died at the hands of someone much younger than him. For Shi Xiangran, who had always been regarded as a genius in his family, This was simply a great humiliation. If I don't smash you into meat paste, my name will be written upside down. Shi Xiangran's eyes were bloodshot, and he roared at Jianshun in a roaring voice. Then, he immediately took out a fist-sized iron block from his space belt and threw it high into the sky. The iron block quickly enlarged in the air, and the light between heaven and earth suddenly dimmed. The base of the iron block had expanded to a huge object with a diameter of 200 meters, covering the sky above everyone's heads, and then with a surging energy wave, it fiercely pressed down from the sky. Du Gufeng, who was carrying a 2-meter-long fiery red greatsword on his back, looked up at the iron block pressing down from the sky. His eyes flashed, and he immediately pulled out the 2-handed greatsword on his back and slashed at the iron block in the sky with a wave of fire. When the wave of fire appeared, the surrounding temperature suddenly rose to a very terrifying level. Jed Wukong, who was holding a 1-meter-long greatsword, showed a look of disdain in his eyes. He snorted coldly, and his greatsword also slashed at the iron block in the sky with a wave of fire. Suddenly, the already terrifying temperature in the surroundings rose to a whole new level. The surrounding plants withered instantly. Even the towering ancient trees withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. If it weren't for the fact that the plants here were living creatures with a lot of water and had a strong resistance to fire, it was likely that this place would have burned into a sea of fire. Qin Ji's face turned gloomy. An arm-length scimitar appeared in his hand. The entire blade of the scimitar flickered with a faint green light. The shape of the scimitar was very strange. The blade looked like a saw, and every tooth was incomparably sharp. Qin Ji held his sword with one hand and swung it at the Treasure Mountain seal that was pressing down from the sky. A 1-meter-long, faint green sword light shot toward the Treasure Mountain seal with immense power. At the same time, Tiemu Ling took out a long whip and chuckled. This little brother's temper is quite big. We didn't offend you, so you can't randomly throw things at people. With that, Tiemu Ling's hand trembled, and the whip in her hand left behind an afterimage in the air as it lashed towards the Treasure Mountain seal. Whoosh! A golden light flashed, and the yellow-clothed girl loosened her bowstring. An energy arrow completely condensed from pure Saint Force shot towards the Treasure Mountain seal with lightning speed. At this moment, the 5 great experts all made their moves. Each of them took out a terrifyingly powerful ruler armament. The only difference was that this time, the 4 of them were dealing with one person and the yellow-clothed girl who also had a ruler armament. Shi Zhuanran's Treasure Mountain seal expanded to a diameter of 200 meters as it smashed down. Such a large area seemed to have enveloped everyone below. He had lost his mind due to anger, and his unintentional actions had actually offended everyone present. By the time Shi Wanran understood, it was already too late. Boom! The 6 ruler armaments collided, creating a deafening sound. Immediately, the ground cracked and the earth shook. The unimaginably powerful shockwaves swept out in all directions. Including the 5 great experts in Jianshan, no one was able to stabilize their bodies. They quickly retreated, and with every step they took, they left a deep footprint in the ground. Following the deafening explosion, a shout suddenly rang out. Everyone released their Saint Force as much as they could, creating a defensive barrier to block the terrifying shockwaves. Among everyone present, only Shi Wanran, who was in the middle of the barrier, remained the most stable. His barrier's defense was extremely powerful, and although the shockwaves were powerful, they were far from being able to harm him. They could only push him back. The 4 ruler armaments returned to their master's hands, and the Treasure Mountain seal that had been attacked by the 5 ruler armaments was like a cannonball. It was sent flying high into the sky, but when it fell back down, it returned to Shi Zhuanran's hands. Violent energy ripples swept out in all directions, destroying the surrounding environment. Countless ancient trees were uprooted, and countless fragile weeds were pulverized. On the ground, a huge crack that was half a meter wide appeared, and with it as the center, it spread out in all directions like a spider web. A moment later, When the violent shock waves gradually calmed down, not a single blade of grass could be seen within 1,000 meters. There were no longer any trees. It was a complete mess. Sher Wanran, who was in the middle of the barrier, had an extremely gloomy expression on his face. He felt incomparably furious inside. He never thought that his impulsive actions would actually offend everyone present. In his heart, he attributed all of this to Jianshan. "Little brother, you must be one of the 5 great experts," Sher Wanran. "Ioyo, this little girl doesn't remember offending little brother in any way. Why did little brother want to kill me as soon as you arrived?" Luckily, this little girl had some self-defense methods, and with the help of so many little brothers, I was able to barely survive this disaster. Otherwise, this little girl really would have been smashed into meat paste by little brother. Hearing Tianmu Ling's words, Sher Zhuanran's gloomy expression became even uglier. However, he seemed to have thought of something, and his expression immediately returned to normal. He cupped his hands apologetically to everyone and said, "I'm sorry, everyone. I was impulsive when I discovered an enemy, which was why I made such a stupid mistake. I am Sher Wanran. I don't want to become your enemy, so please don't mind me." Following that, Sher Wanran pointed his finger at Jianshan and provoked, "Do you dare to come out and fight me? Do you only know how to hide behind a woman? What's the difference between you and a coward?" Sher Zhuanran's voice was filled with disdain for Jianshan. Jianshan's expression suddenly darkened. He stared at Sher Wanran with a sharp gaze. The intense killing intent in his eyes was not concealed at all. Saint Force surged out from his right hand, quickly condensing into a silver-white sword. He then slowly walked towards Sher Wanran. Right now, he planned to use the Azure and Violet Sword Chi. Although he wasn't sure if the Azure and Violet Sword Chi would be able to break through Sher Zhuanran's barrier, it was Jianshan's only hope. Seeing that Jianshan actually wanted to fight Sher Wanran, the yellow-clothed girl, standing to the side, couldn't help but become anxious. She stepped in front of Jianshan, blocking his path. At the same time, she stared at Sher Wanran with an angry expression and shouted, "Sher Wanran, you despicable and shameless bastard. If it weren't for the barrier protecting you, you would have already been killed by him. What qualifications do you have to challenge him? If you have the guts, throw away the barrier and fight with your own abilities." Sher Zhuanran's expression suddenly changed again because of the yellow-clothed girl's words. The yellow-clothed girl's words just happened to hit Sher Zhuanran's sore spot. He coldly stared at the yellow-clothed girl and angrily said, "You stinking woman! You!" The yellow-clothed girl was flustered. Her beautiful eyes were filled with anger as she stared at Sher Wanran. Her gaze was as if she wanted to cut Sher Wanran into 1,000 pieces. At this time, Qinji arrived between the two sides. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Friends, would you be willing to listen to what I have to say?" Without waiting for the two sides to speak, Qinji continued, "Since we are all gathered here, I presume you all already know the secret of this place. Thus, I will not waste time talking nonsense. There is indeed a cave ahead that was left behind by a predecessor. This is something that many of us here can testify to, so it is definitely not fake. However, there are several extremely powerful magic beasts guarding outside the cave. Even if we possess king armaments, it would still be difficult for us to charge in. Thus, I hope that you all can temporarily put aside your personal grudges and join forces. With everyone's strength, perhaps we might be able to defeat those magic beasts and enter the cave to obtain the things inside. Otherwise, I'm afraid that we will never be able to enter the cave. After all, there are only a dozen or so days left until the end of the elimination round. That's right. If we want to enter the cave, the only way is to join forces. Those magic beasts are extremely powerful. The one who spoke was Dugu Feng, who was carrying a 2-meter-long fiery red greatsword on his back. He was also one of the 5 experts with a king armament. Ha ha ha, that seems to make some sense. Little brothers, why don't the two of you put aside your grudges for now? The most important thing right now is to enter the cave and obtain the things inside. I've heard that there are heaven-tier battle skills inside. TSK, TSK, TSK. A heaven-tier battle skill is such a huge temptation. Furthermore, as the cultivation cave of a senior expert, there definitely aren't just heaven-tier battle skills inside. Perhaps there are other precious items, said Timu Ling. Right now, there are only a dozen or so days left until the end of the elimination round. Once the time is up, all of us will be teleported out by a mysterious force. We won't be able to continue staying here. If everyone wants to enter the cave, then we can only join forces. The one who spoke was the purple-robed middle-aged man standing beside Dugafeng. Hearing everyone's words, Jinshin's eyes flickered with uncertainty. After hesitating for a while, he finally put away his light wind sword. In his heart, he had a strong desire for a heaven-tier battle skill. He had come to participate in a mercenary gathering for a heaven-tier battle skill because the Chanyang Prefecture just happened to lack one. Chapter 313. Shi Xiangran coldly snorted. He stared at Jianshan with eyes filled with resentment and said, "Count yourself lucky. I'll let you off for now." With that, Shi Xiangran placed the seal of the treasure mountain, which had shrunk to the size of a fist, into his space ring. However, the barrier around him did not disperse and continued to protect him. Jianshan did not back down and retorted, "You better hide in your turtle shell forever. I like to see how long your turtle shell can last." Saint rulers had to pay a great price to leave behind their own barrier, yet it was actually called a turtle shell by someone else. Shi Xiangran's face paled in anger. When everyone heard what Jianshan had said, Qin Ji, Jieda, Wukong, Dugufeng, and Timu Ling's expressions became rather unnatural. Ha! There's actually someone who calls the barrier energy left behind by a saint ruler a tortoise shell. This is the first time I've heard of such a thing in my entire life. Little brother Jin sure has a personality, Timu Ling giggled. All right, everyone, there's not much time left. Let's quickly come up with a plan. We already have 6 ruler armaments here, so we'll definitely be able to kill those powerful magical beasts. The most important thing right now is how to minimize our losses, said Qin Ji. Seeing that the battle had settled down, the people who had been pushed 1,000 meters away all returned. There were quite a few Earth Saint Masters among them. As expected of the 5 great experts, they're actually so powerful. What kind of treasure was that thing that was enlarged to 200 meters? It looked very powerful. I think I heard them mention something about ruler armaments. Strange, what are ruler armaments? Why have I never heard of them before? Many people were talking at once, but no one dared to make a ruckus. Their voices were very low. There are a total of 4 demonic beasts guarding the cave, and each of them is a rare variant species. They are very strong, and we need at least 2 people with king armaments to be able to fight one of them to a draw. Roughly speaking, if we want to suppress or even kill those demonic beasts, we need at least 3 people with king armaments to attack one of them. Right now, we have 6 king armaments here, so we can only deal with 2 demonic beasts. As for the remaining 2, we can only leave it to the others, Qin Ji said with a solemn expression. We have quite a few Earth Saint Masters here. We can leave the remaining 2 magical beasts to them. Although they don't have ruler armaments, they have the advantage of numbers. With so many people, it should be possible to deal with 2 magical beasts. Dugafeng said. Qin Ji nodded. That's right. Now we have to let everyone join forces. Only in this way can we break through the blockade of the 4 magical beasts. I agree with this plan, Dugafeng said. I agree too, Jed Wukong said. Out of the 5 experts, 3 of them had already agreed, so the remaining 2 had no objections. Brother Jianshan, may I ask what the 2 of you think? Qin Ji looked at Jianshan and the yellow-clothed girl. He didn't ask about the 4 people behind Jianshan. With his eyesight, he could naturally see that Jianshan and the yellow-clothed girl were the backbone of this group. Of course I have no objections, Jianshan said with a smile. The yellow-clothed girl didn't say anything. She only nodded and agreed to this proposal. Seeing that the strongest people here had reached an agreement, Qin Ji's face revealed a trace of a happy smile. He swept his gaze around and said loudly to the surrounding people, "Everyone, the 5 of us have gathered here. We have already joined forces and are preparing to break into the cave. Those who are willing to move with us, please step forward. We will work together to prepare to kill the magical beasts guarding the cave. The things inside the cave will belong to whoever obtains them through luck." As soon as Qin Ji finished speaking, quite a few people stepped forward. After a few breaths of time, the number of people who stood out had reached more than 90%. There were even quite a few people who were only great Saint Masters. Those who aren't Earth Saint Masters shouldn't go to their deaths. We only invite Earth Saint Masters to move with us. Dugu Feng, who was carrying a 2-meter-long sword on his back, frowned and said in a low voice. He was very dissatisfied with the fact that even great Saint Masters wanted to join in the fun. Hearing this, the people who were only great Saint Masters could only helplessly retreat. Following their retreat, there were still over 70 people remaining. Every single one of them had the strength of an Earth Saint Master. There were even a few people who had injuries on their bodies. Their faces were sickly pale. All right, now that everyone has come over, let's discuss the plan. I suggest that we divide into 4 groups. Each group will deal with a magical beast alone. Does anyone have any objections? Qin Ji said. This suggestion is not bad. I agree. I also agree. Everyone began to speak one after another. Then how should we divide the people in these 4 groups? Someone asked. Qin Ji said with a smile. Regarding this, I already have a plan in mind. The people in our circle will be divided into 2 groups. On average, each group will have over a dozen people. Your 70 people will be divided into 2 groups. On average, each group will have over 30 people. What does everyone think? The people in Qin Ji's circle were naturally those who stood at the very center. At the same time, they also held ruler armaments. This included Jinshin and the others. On the surface, it seemed like the people in the circle had a great advantage. In reality, this was not the case. This was because the people in the circle were basically the strongest existences present. Other than a few people, almost all of them could easily fight one against 3 or even more people. Now, let's divide the people into 2 groups. Qin Ji's gaze swept past Jinshin and the yellow-clothed girl. With a smile on his face, he said, Jinshin, I wonder if we can form a group. Jinshin was clearly stunned by Qin Ji's initiative. However, he quickly recovered and said with a smile, to be able to be together with Brother Qin, this is our honor. Little brother, you're the most handsome person here. Big sister also wants to be together with you. You won't refuse, right? Tian Muling leisurely walked in front of Jinshin. Her breath smelled like orchids. Jinshin chuckled. His face didn't turn red, and his heart didn't skip a beat as he said, Of course I have no objections. I just don't know if Brother Qin, I have no objections. Miss Tian Muling will join. Qin Ji very elegantly smiled at Tian Muling. Little sister, I see that you don't have a good expression. Are you very unwilling to let Big Sister join you? Little sister, don't worry. Big sister won't steal this handsome little brother from your hands. Tian Muling was very charming, and her smile was very beautiful. Don't spout nonsense. The yellow-clothed girl was fuming. She angrily glared at Tian Muling, and it seemed as if her eyes were about to spit fire. Little sister, you have quite a temper. That's not good. Girls should be a bit gentler and more considerate. Only then will men like you. No man will like you if you act like this. Tian Muling didn't seem to get angry as she continued to chuckle. The yellow-clothed girl's reaction was very intense. She immediately pulled the sun-moon bow into a full circle and pointed the arrow at Tian Muling. She shouted, If you keep talking nonsense, don't blame me for being impolite. Tian Muling cried out in surprise. She dodged and hid behind Jinshin. She said with a face full of fear, Little sister, Big sister is only joking with you. You can't be impulsive. Otherwise, little brother won't be able to keep his life. Jinshan helplessly sighed and said, Tian Muling, stop teasing her. Her temper isn't good. Little brother's words are too true. Her temper is indeed very bad. Tian Muling foolishly smiled. She then stopped teasing the yellow-clothed girl. The surrounding people looked at this scene as if they were watching a show. Many people revealed a faint smile on their faces, but no one said anything. Next, the 4 groups were quickly allocated. Jinshan, the yellow-clothed girl, Tian Muling, and Qin Ji were in the first group. Behind Tian Muling were 2 expressionless middle-aged men. They all had calm expressions and weren't weak. Qin Ji had 3 middle-aged men beside him. Behind Jianshan were Senior In, Yun Zheng, the Zither Master, and Qin Xiao. The second group was led by Shi Xiangran, Jie Wukong, and Duge Feng. Behind Jie Wukong and Duge Feng were a dozen middle-aged men. They were all experts from their respective families. Only Shi Xiangran was alone. He didn't have any followers. Although these two groups didn't have the same number of people, each group had 3 people with ruler armaments. They were the 2 strongest groups. The last 2 groups were made up of over 70 Earth Saint Masters. Each group had over 30 people, but because they were a ragtag bunch, they didn't have the slightest experience of working together. As a result, their battle prowess was the weakest of the 4 groups. Let's all rest up today. Adjust to your peak condition. We'll set off tomorrow morning. Afterward, everyone began to set up tents. Because the previous battle had cleared out an area of 1,000 meters, there was enough space. Although the great Saint Masters couldn't work together with everyone, not a single one of them left. They all chose to set up camp in the outermost area to watch the rare battle. There were even a few people who planned on sneaking in. After the tents were set up, Jianshan called Senior In, Yun Zheng, Zither Master, and Qin Xiao into the tent. He said, "Do you plan on coming with us, or temporarily leaving? But I have to remind you that although the magical beasts guarding the cave are strong, they aren't the greatest threat. The greatest threat still comes from their own kind. Outside, although we seem to be working together to deal with the magical beasts, once we successfully enter the cave, our alliance will be torn apart in an instant. An intense battle will occur. Jianshan, we all know this. I'm too weak. Even if I go in, I won't be able to help you. Moreover, the shockwaves from the battle between Earth Saint Masters are already hard for me to bear. So I'll stay outside and wait for your return." Qin Xiao didn't hesitate at all and took the initiative to leave. Qin Xiao's withdrawal was within Jianshan's expectations. Even if Qin Xiao insisted on going in, Jianshan would do everything in his power to dissuade him. "What about you 3? Jianshan looked at the remaining 3. "I'll stay," Zither Master expressionlessly said. Senior In and Yun Zheng looked at each other. After a slight hesitation, Senior In spoke first. "Brother Jianshan, I'll go in with you. Although I'm not as strong as you, it's not bad to go in and increase your morale." Chapter 3:14. On the morning of the second day, everyone packed up their tents and formed a long line as they walked towards the depths of the forest. Perhaps the stone Xiangran was frightened by Jianshan's divine, sword manipulation divine ability, but he still continued to move forward, not daring to lower his guard in the slightest. On the road, Qin Ji opened his mouth to explain, "There are a total of 4 magical beasts guarding the cave, all of which belong to a different species. Each of them is very powerful. They're the flying spirit snake, the purple gold thunder lion, the earthworm, and the pangolin emperor. According to our experience from fighting them these past few days, we have determined that their strength is almost the same, but they all have different innate abilities. The flying spirit snake has the ability to fly and has a very strong poison. Once it takes to the sky, it will be very difficult to deal with. The purple gold thunder lion has a layer of purple scales on its body. Its defense is not bad, and its attack is very strong. It can spit out lightning, and its entire body is covered with a layer of powerful lightning energy. It is best not to approach its body. On the other hand, the Dishi dragon is a mutated Dishi dragon. Its defense is extremely strong, and its attack power is not comparable to the violet gold thunder lion. Its only weakness is its slow speed. To people with Wind Saint force, the Dishi dragon is less of a threat to them than the other 3. As for the last pangolin emperor, it's a bit of a headache. The pangolin emperor's attack is the weakest among the 4 beasts, but it's also the most troublesome. Not only is it very fast, but it can also instantly drill into the ground and escape, avoiding all attacks on the ground. The pangolin emperor's movement is completely silent. There's no trace at all. It can appear behind or under your feet to attack you at any time. Although its attack power is not as good as the previous 3 beasts, it's still very difficult to guard against. Speaking of the pangolin emperor, Qin Ji's eyebrows tightly wrinkled. Obviously, he had suffered many losses at the hands of the pangolin emperor. Qingji, then which magical beast do you think we should deal with? Jianshun asked while walking. Of course, it's the flying spirit snake. One of the 3 king weapons in our team is a longbow. Once the flying spirit snake flies into the sky, we can shoot it with arrows. The other weapon is a whip that can restrict the flying spirit snake's movements. It can even bind its body and prevent it from flying. These 2 weapons are the bane of the flying spirit snake. Qingji said without hesitation. Jianxin pondered for a moment before agreeing with Qingji's suggestion. That's right, the flying spirit snake poses a much smaller threat to us compared to the other magic beasts. Let's choose the flying spirit snake then. Hearing the conversation between Qingji and the others, De Gufeng turned his head and said, "The earthworm's defense is very strong. In addition, its strength is also not weak. I'm afraid an ordinary Earth Saint's attack won't be able to injure it. Only a king weapon can injure it. Naturally, we will deal with it. As for the purple gold Thunder Lion and the Pangolin Emperor, let the 2 teams behind us deal with them." Soon, everyone finished their discussion. The Pangolin Emperor and the purple gold Thunder Lion, which are the most difficult to guard against, naturally fell into the hands of the last 2 teams. Although some people were very dissatisfied with this, they had nothing to say. The flying spirit snake had the ability to fly. Once it was in the air, the people on the ground could only stare at it helplessly. Moreover, the flying spirit snake could also use its poison to attack the people on the ground. For this kind of magic beast, leaving it in the hands of Jianshun, who had a longbow and a long whip, was the best choice. As for the Dishi dragon, there were quite a few people who vaguely understood the situation. Any creature that had the word dragon in its name was not simple. Perhaps the Dishi dragon's defense was just as De Gufeng had said. A normal Earth Saint Master would not be able to cause any harm to it. And for such a powerful magical beast to be in the hands of a team with 3 ruler armaments, it seemed reasonable. Although the Pangolin Emperor and the purple gold Thunder Lion were not easy to deal with, the remaining 2 teams had a very big advantage. That was the number of people. 30 Earth Saint Masters against a magic beast should not be too difficult. After walking for 10 kilometers, the group finally stopped. There was still a mess left behind from the battle. Suddenly, several loud beast roars came from the front, shaking the earth and deafening the ears. Following that, 3 huge magic beasts appeared in front of the group. One of them was a python with a body as thick as a water tank. Its head was larger than an adult's body. On its back, there were 3 sets of huge black wings. It was the flying spirit snake. Beside the flying spirit snake was a ferocious beast that looked like a lion. Its body was even larger than an elephant. Its body was covered with fine purple gold scales. From time to time, lightning would jump around its body. It was the purple gold Thunder Lion. Beside the purple gold Thunder Lion was a creature that looked like a gecko. It was 1 meter tall and 10 meters long. It relied on its 4 short legs to support itself on the ground. Its body was also covered in yellow scales, densely covering its entire body. When these 3 magic beasts appeared, the entire area was enveloped by an extremely powerful aura. It made everyone feel as if a large rock was pressing down on their chests, making it difficult for them to breathe. Everyone, let's go together. The Pangolin Emperor is very likely to be hiding on the ground. Be careful, De Gufeng shouted. He pulled out the fiery red greatsword from his back and rushed towards the Dishi dragon. Beside him, Jed Wukong, Shi Xiangran, and a dozen middle-aged men also followed behind. At this moment, apart from the team that was dealing with the Pangolin Emperor, the other 3 teams simultaneously attacked the 3 magic beasts. Whoosh! With a flash of golden light, the yellow-clothed girl held the sun moon bow and shot at the flying spirit snake. Boom! When the golden arrow came into contact with the flying spirit snake's body, it exploded. The flying spirit snake's body shook for a moment before stabilizing. On its huge body, there was only a bloody hole. The flying spirit snake was immediately enraged. It let out an ear-piercing hiss as it twisted its body and slid towards the yellow-clothed girl. Qingji took out a 1 meter long, strangely shaped scimitar and said in a deep voice, Use a long whip to bind its body. Tianmu Ling's face became serious. With a wave of her hand, the whip in her hand turned into a phantom as it lashed towards the flying spirit snake. While it was still in the air, the whip quickly lengthened until it became a 100-meter-long rope that tightly bound the flying spirit snake's wings together, preventing it from flying into the air. "Let's go," Qinji shouted as he led the 3 middle-aged men towards the flying spirit snake. At the same time, Jinshin's body left behind an afterimage as he approached the flying spirit snake with a light wind sword in his hand. Senior In and Yunzheng also took out their saint weapons and followed closely behind Jinshin. Chapter 3:15. The battle lasted for a moment, and then a painful scream came from the field. A middle-aged man was bitten by a huge rat head that popped out of the ground and dragged into the ground, disappearing. "That's the Pangolin Emperor. The Pangolin Emperor has appeared. Everyone be careful of the ground." Everyone was shocked as they stared at the ground with a serious expression. At this moment, behind a half-naked man, a fat golden rat leaped out from the ground and bit the man's upper body. "Careful! The Pangolin Emperor has appeared. Quickly attack it. Don't let it hide underground." As soon as the Pangolin Emperor emerged from the ground, everyone began to shout out in alarm. Immediately, several people began to attack the Pangolin Emperor. The Pangolin Emperor was extremely fast. It bit down on the man's upper body and immediately dragged him into the ground. However, there are still 3 saint weapons with powerful saint force that struck its body, only to create some sparks. The Pangolin Emperor was also a scaled magical beast. Its body was covered in a thick layer of golden scales. Although its defense was not as strong as the earthworm, it was still not something a normal Earth Saint Master could break through. A sharp earth spike instantly pierced out from the ground, piercing deeply into a person's crotch from below, making it impossible for the person to guard against. The person let out a miserable cry as he stabbed his sword into the ground with a layer of fire attributed saint force in an attempt to injure the Pangolin Emperor. However, the ground was filled with mud, and the Pangolin Emperor had already changed its position. An intense purple light flashed and illuminated the entire area. On the other side, the violet gold thunder lion spat out a bolt of blue lightning that was as thick as an arm. The person closest to it was charred black and fell to the ground. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. More than a dozen people surrounded the purple gold thunder lion and attacked at the same time. Clanging sounds rang out as the saint weapon struck the purple gold thunder lion's body. Sparks and blood flew everywhere. Although the purple gold thunder lion's defense wasn't weak, it couldn't withstand so many people. In just a short while, it had already suffered several wounds. The violet gold thunder lion roared again and again. Its sharp claws continuously clawed at the people surrounding it. Thick bolts of lightning shot out from its mouth, and each bolt accurately hit a person. No one could dodge. Not long after, more than 10 of the 30 Earth Saint Masters surrounding the violet gold thunder lion had already been hit by the lightning. They were charred black and could no longer get up. There were also 3 people whose chests were pierced by the violet gold thunder lion's claws and died on the spot. There were quite a few people who were injured. The purple gold thunder lion's attack power was extremely strong, and the team that faced it could be said to have suffered the most casualties. On the other side, the 2 groups that were fighting the flying spirit snake and Dishi dragon were much more relaxed. These 2 groups each had 3 ruler weapons, and their strength was not bad. Not a single person was injured. Every time the ruler weapons in Qinji's group's hands struck the Dishi dragon's body, they could easily break through the Dishi dragon's scales and cause it heavy injuries. In just a short while, the yellow Dishi dragon had completely turned into a blood dragon. The flying spirit snake's fate was not much better than the Dishi dragon's. Its wings were tightly bound by Tianmu Ling's whip. Although Tianmu Ling was still unable to use the whip's true power, the strength of a ruler weapon was still not something the flying spirit snake could contend against. With its wings bound, the flying spirit snake's strength was greatly reduced. Even its movements were greatly affected. It could only use 60% of its battle prowess. Every time the ruler weapon in Qin hand struck the flying spirit snake's body, it would leave a 1-meter-long wound on its body. The flying spirit snake was in so much pain that it would constantly roar. The yellow-clothed girl stood in the distance and constantly shot arrows. One after another, the energy arrows shot towards the flying spirit snake's head, creating a series of violent explosions. The flying spirit snake's head shook incessantly, causing blood to flow out. Jinshin and the other middle-aged men surrounded the flying spirit snake's body and constantly attacked it. The flying spirit snake's huge body was constantly covered in wounds. Although the magical beasts were extremely powerful, there were just too many people attacking them at the same time. Moreover, every single one of them was at least an Earth Saint Master. Even with their powerful strength, it was still difficult for the flying spirit snake and the Dishi dragon to endure the attacks of the 3 ruler weapons. Their injuries were much more severe than the violet gold thunder lions. Currently, only the Pangolin Emperor was using its advantage to continuously ambush the group and was still in good condition. The flying spirit snake's body violently writhed. The bound wings on its back never stopped struggling. Moreover, as its injuries became more and more severe, its temperament became even more berserk. The strength of its needles constantly increased. Tiamuling's face was filled with seriousness. She gritted her teeth, and a layer of fine sweat had already appeared on her forehead. She was using all of her strength to maintain the whip that bound the flying spirit snake's wings. Suddenly, the flying spirit snake let out a hoarse roar. Then, it spat out a mouthful of highly corrosive poisonous fog. It quickly spread in all directions. When the poisonous fog came close to everyone's body, their clothes were immediately corroded at a speed visible to the naked eye. This poison is very poisonous. It can penetrate the defense of Saint Force. Once poisoned, it will only take 2 hours to take the life of an Earth Saint Master. Everyone, quickly retreat. Qinji immediately shouted. The 3 middle-aged men and senior N's group immediately retreated out of the poison's range. Within the range of the poison's range, one's line of sight became very blurry. It was simply impossible to see anything from the outside. A transparent barrier enveloped Qinji. Inside the barrier, Qinji completely gave up on defense. Holding his blade with both hands, he leapt high into the air and viciously chopped down on the flying spirit snake's vital point. Rip! A terrifying wound over 1 meter long appeared on the flying spirit snake's vital point. Afterwards, Qinji's hands did not stop moving. Following the previous wound, Qinji viciously stabbed his blade into the flying spirit snake's vital point, all the way to the hilt. The flying spirit snake let out an ear-piercing shriek. Its huge body began to churn violently. An afterimage flashed past, and the snake's tail fiercely slammed into the barrier protecting Qinji. Although Qinji wasn't injured, his entire body was sent flying far away by the impact. At this moment, Qinji's pupils abruptly shrank. Within the poisonous fog that covered the sky, he seemed to vaguely catch a glimpse of a purple and a green light. Illo! In the next moment, a miserable shriek came from the flying spirit snake's mouth. Due to the dense poison's range of vision, no one was able to clearly see what was happening inside. However, they could clearly feel the ground around them trembling violently. The flying spirit snake continued to let out miserable shrieks within the poisonous fog. Its voice was filled with pain. The poisonous fog that enveloped the area also began to churn, as if a flood dragon was stirring up clouds and raining rain. Covered in blood, Jinshin retreated from the other side of the poisonous fog. His clothes had already been corroded by the poison and were completely melted. Furthermore, his body was covered in green poison. Although the yellow-clothed girl and the others were standing in front of him, they could not see Jinshin because of the layer of poisonous fog that could not be seen with the naked eye. Jinshin immediately took out a set of clothes and wiped off the poison on his body as quickly as possible. Then, he took out a new set of clothes and quickly put them on. After everything that had happened last night, Jinshan walked around the poisonous fog with a smile on his face and rejoined the group. At this time, the violently churning flying spirit snake finally calmed down. A gentle breeze blew and dispersed the poisonous fog, revealing the scene inside. When everyone saw the scene in front of them, each and every one of them was dumbstruck. Their faces were filled with shock. Even Qin-Ji's eyes were filled with astonishment. The flying spirit snake's huge body was lying on the ground. From its 7 inches, it was cut into 2 halves. Bright red blood flowed out like a fountain. Its heart, which was the size of an adult's head, was also broken into 2 halves. At this moment, it was lying on the ground, weakly struggling. Although it was not dead yet, it was not far from death. Furthermore, the magic core that was originally in its heart had disappeared without a trace. Qin-Ji's mind couldn't help but recall the indistinct purple and green light that he had seen a moment ago. Immediately, he understood. His gaze towards Jianshan immediately changed greatly. However, he tactfully did not say anything and suppressed all the doubts in his heart. At this time, the earthworm also let out a mournful cry. It fell to the ground, covered in wounds. Its head had already been smashed into meat paste by Shi Jingran's seal of the treasure mountain. Even its body was covered in hundreds of large and small wounds. The flying spirit snake and the earthworm had already been killed. The remaining violet gold thunder lion was still alive and kicking. Although its body was also covered in wounds, the number of fatal wounds were pitifully small. The violet gold thunder lion was a strange creature. Its strength was much stronger than other magical beasts of the same level. Ordinary Earth Saint Masters could only cause a few light wounds to it. The pangolin emperor was the most intact one. It was still moving up and down on the ground, playing a game of hide-and-seek with a few people on the ground. Its elusive nature made it impossible to guard against. Once it burrowed into the ground, it would instantly disappear without leaving behind a single trace. It was an extremely troublesome sight. The 2 groups dealing with the violet gold thunder lion and the pangolin emperor had suffered heavy casualties. Among them, the group dealing with the violet gold thunder lion had already lost more than a dozen people. Many of them had suffered heavy injuries, but they still stubbornly fought the violet gold thunder lion. As for the group dealing with the pangolin emperor, 7 of them had been swallowed alive. More than a dozen people had suffered injuries of varying degrees, but they had not harmed the pangolin emperor in the slightest. The violet gold thunder lion is too strong. Quickly come and help us. We can't hold on for much longer. Quickly come and help us deal with the pangolin emperor. Many people saw the flying spirit snake and the earthworm dragon being killed and cried out for help with joy. After dealing with the earthworm dragon, Dugu Feng and the others collected its monster core. They did not pay any attention to the 2 groups that were still fighting. Instead, they quickly led the group out of the forest. Don't worry about them. Let's go. We can't fall behind. The cave is just ahead. Qin-Ji also called out to Jianshan and the others. He led the 3 middle-aged men and chased after Dugu Feng and the others. As for the Class 5 flying spirit snake's corpse, they did not even look at it. Jianshan also did not care about the flying spirit snake's corpse. He called out to the group and chased after them into the depths of the forest. After sprinting for 2 kilometers, Jianshan followed Qin-Ji and finally entered a cave. The cave was very deep. Above the corridor, there were luminous pearls emitting white light hanging at intervals. The walls of the tunnel were flat and smooth. It was obvious that someone had used absolute strength to forcefully carve out the tunnel. Boom! A loud sound came from the front of the tunnel. The entire tunnel shook violently. Jianshan followed behind the yellow-clothed girl, Tianmu Ling, and Seniorin. The 5 of them quickly approached the front and quickly met up with Dugu Feng and the others. Seeing Jianshan and the others enter, the stone statue, standing in the middle of the group, immediately activated a barrier to protect itself. In front of the group, a stone door blocked their path. Chapter 316. Don't care what kind of door it is. Let me break it. Dugu Feng took a large step forward and ruthlessly punched the stone door. Following a muffled sound, the stone door still stood there without budging. Only a little bit of dust fell down. Seeing this scene, everyone's eyes were filled with shock. Even Dugu Feng was taken aback as he muttered, "Is this really a stone door?" Dugufeng was very clear about the strength of his punch. Not to mention a stone door, even a steel door would have a hole in it. However, the stone door in front of him was not damaged at all. Heavens, is this still a stone door? It's actually so hard. What kind of material is this stone door made of? It's actually so hard. This stone door is definitely not an ordinary object. Everyone started to discuss. Who cares what it is? Anything that dares to block my path is destined to be destroyed. Dugufeng coldly snorted. He extended his hand and pulled out the fiery red greatsword on his back. He planned to use his king armament. Seeing that Dugufeng actually used his powerful king armament, the others all retreated, afraid that they would be affected. The king armament in Dugufeng's hand emitted raging flames. Following a loud shout, he fiercely punched the stone door with an enormous force that caused everyone to tremble. Boom! A deafening sound rang out, and the entire cave violently shook. Everyone's body swayed, and they were unable to stand steadily. After a while, when everything calmed down, everyone opened their eyes wide again. Their faces were filled with disbelief. The stone door was actually standing there without any damage. What kind of material is this stone door made of? Isn't it a little too hard? Tianmuling, who was standing behind Jianshan, covered her mouth and stuttered. Her face was filled with shock. At this moment, even Dugufeng was unable to maintain the calmness on his face. He was instantly moved. Such an unremarkable-looking stone door was actually able to withstand the attack of a king armament without being damaged in the slightest. It was truly unbelievable. Qin Ji, who was wearing a luxurious robe, walked in front of the stone door. He extended his hand and touched the thick stone door. After muttering to himself for a while, he said to everyone, "Once we break this stone door, we can truly enter the cave. Let those with king armaments attack at the same time. I don't believe that this stone door can withstand our combined attacks." "That's right. This should be the best method right now," Jita Wukong softly said. That's good. Little brothers, you have to use your strength later. I'm also willing to help. Whether we can break this thick stone door or not will depend on you." Tianmuling, who was emitting a mature charm, chuckled. She was extremely charming. Immediately after, she walked in front of Jianshan and charmingly looked at him. She lightly smiled and said, "Little brother Jianshan, do you want to give it a try?" Jianshan bitterly smiled and shook his head. He said, "I don't have a king armament, so my attack power is extremely weak. Moreover, the width of this passage is limited, so it can't hold too many people. I won't hinder everyone." As soon as Jianshan finished speaking, a great beast's roar rang out from outside. Everyone's face changed when they heard that. This is the sound of the purple gold thunder lion. Moreover, there are dense footsteps. Damn it, they actually came over and even lured the purple gold thunder lion over. "Everyone, let's hurry up and attack," Qin Ji said in a deep voice. They didn't hesitate at all. Dugufeng, Jita Wukong, Shi Xiangran, Qin Ji, and Tianmuling all stood in front of the stone door. They all took out their king armaments and began to charge up, preparing to unleash their strongest attack. At the same time, a few transparent barriers suddenly appeared and enveloped them. This scene shocked Jianshan. He didn't think that these people would have Saint Ruler's barrier within them. His gaze then turned to the yellow-clothed girl. He saw her standing 10 meters away with her bow fully drawn. What was different was that she didn't have a barrier protecting her. He didn't know whether it was because there was no Saint Ruler's barrier within her or because she didn't use it at all. At this moment, other than the 6 people who used their king armaments, everyone else retreated far away. 6 king armaments attacking at full strength at the same time created a storm of energy that was enough to injure an Earth Saint Master. Attack! With that order, the 6 people unleashed their strongest attacks at the same time. A golden arrow tore through the bow and shot towards the stone door with lightning speed. However, the Treasure Mountain seal in Shi Xiangran's hand didn't enlarge. It remained the size of a fist. He viciously smashed the seal towards the stone door. The others also swung their king armaments and attacked the stone door in unison. Boom! An even more oppressive sound rang out, and the surging energy formed a terrifying energy storm in the narrow cave. It surged out of the cave, and the entire cave shook violently, as if it was about to collapse due to the heavy load. Jinshin and the other Earth Saint Masters all stuck close to the walls of the cave, firmly stabilizing their bodies. At the same time, Saint Force surged out of their bodies and formed a layer of defense around them. After a long while, when the energy waves gradually calmed down, the 6 people holding king weapons were pushed back more than 10 meters by the energy waves. However, they were protected by the enchantment, so they were not affected at all. Only the yellow-clothed girl's face was slightly pale. When they looked at the stone door again, it was already covered with cracks, but it hadn't shattered. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. The powerful defense of the stone door had exceeded everyone's imagination. They never thought that it would be able to withstand the combined attack of 6 king armaments and still not completely shatter. However, what made everyone rejoice was that the cave was extremely sturdy. It had withstood such a powerful attack. It actually didn't collapse. Again, Jita Wukong roared, unwilling to admit defeat. Following that, the 6 people attacked at the same time. This time, they attacked the stone door with even more power than before. With a violent explosion, countless rocks shot out in all directions. The entire cave reverberated with the sound of the explosion. The 6 people's second attack had finally shattered the stone door that was countless times harder than steel. The moment the stone door shattered, Dugu Feng, Jita Wukong, Shi Xiangran, Qin Ji, and Tianmu Ling endured the violent energy wave and forcefully charged towards the back of the stone door. They had the protection of a barrier, so they didn't have to worry about being injured by the energy wave at all. Sensing their movements, Jinshin's eyes flashed. He also endured the violent energy wave and quickly charged towards the back of the stone door. As he moved forward, Jinshin's body constantly twisted to reduce the resistance of the energy wave. In the end, he actually managed to enter the back of the stone door at the same time as the 5 people who were originally in front of him. Behind the stone door was a spacious space. The energy wave outside didn't have much of an effect on this space. Right in front of them, on a high platform, there was a wooden box quietly lying there. It looked very ordinary and didn't have the slightest bit of peculiarity. Seeing the wooden box, Dugu Feng, Shi Xiangran, Jita Wukong, and Qinji didn't hesitate to rush towards the wooden box. Along the way, the saint weapons in their hands continuously attacked the people around them, tried to slow them down. However, they all had the protection of a barrier, so although the saint weapons were powerful, they couldn't cause any harm to them in a short period of time. A green whip shadow flashed by and instantly overtook the 4 people who were rushing towards the wooden box. It tightly bound the wooden box and then pulled it back. The 4 people immediately reached a tacit agreement and attacked the wooden box at the same time. Pong! The wooden box shattered, and a book made of white beast skin fell from the sky. Due to the impact of the energy wave that had yet to dissipate, the book kept flipping in the air. The 4 of them flew up at the same time. Their 4 hands reached out to grab the book that was falling from the air. They all wanted to snatch the book away from them. Tianmu Ling stood in place without moving a single step. Her wrist shook, and the whip turned into a whip shadow that lashed towards the 4 people. At the same time, the other end of the whip was like a nimble little snake that coiled towards the book. At this moment, the 4 people seemed to be connected. Holding their saint weapons, they attacked Tianmu Ling's whip at the same time. Although the whip was also a saint weapon, how could it fight against the 4 people? It was immediately suppressed. At this moment, the 4 people had already arrived in front of the book made of white beast skin. Their 4 hands shot out like lightning, and each of them grabbed a part of the book before suddenly pulling it to their side. Chi! The link to the book was broken, turning into a dozen broken pages that scattered in the air. In addition, there was still a small remnant of energy wave that turned into a gust of wind that blew in all directions. The 4 people raised their hands and began to collect the broken pages that filled the air. At the same time, Jinshin's body turned into a white blur as he charged towards the 2 broken pages that were flying towards him. Then, with lightning speed, he grabbed the 2 broken pages and continued to charge towards the next broken page. Dugufeng quickly grabbed the 2 broken pages, then instantly approached the next broken page. Just as he was about to grab it, a figure suddenly flashed in front of him. Jinshin's body had already turned into a blur as he swept past him and grabbed the broken page that he was about to grab. Dugufeng was stunned. His face was instantly covered with a layer of killing intent, and his eyes became incomparably sharp. After the 4 people fought with all their strength, the dozen broken pages were all snatched by the 6 people in the blink of an eye. Among them, Timuling had 2, Jinshan had 4, Dugufeng had 4, Jitawukong had 3, Shixiangran had 2, and Qinji had 4. In total, there were 19 broken pages. At this moment, Shixiangran quickly charged towards Jinshan with the barrier. The Treasure Mountain seal in his hand was still the size of a fist as he smashed it towards Jinshan's head. Daring to kill my people, today will be the day you die. No one has ever dared to steal from me. At the same time, Jitawukong and Dugufeng also charged towards Jinshan. The saint weapons in their hands emitted a monstrous energy wave. Chapter 317. The fact that Shixiangran, Jieta, Wukong, and Dugufeng were all attacking him at the same time had truly surprised Jinshan. His face immediately became serious. The 3 of them were protected by a barrier, making it extremely difficult to injure them. Moreover, they also had king weapons in their hands. If he were to be hit by a king weapon, even with Jinshan's strong body, he wouldn't be able to withstand it. Even if he didn't die, he would be left with half his life. In this situation, if Jinshan were to be injured, Shixiangran and the other 2 would definitely not let him go. If that happened, he would never be able to leave this cave. Jinshan's eyes suddenly became crazed. Right now, he could only use his final trump card to fight for his life. A purple and green light suddenly appeared on the light wind sword. Jinshan did not retreat, but instead charged forward. Without the slightest fear, he charged towards Shixiangran. The light wind sword pierced towards Shixiangran's barrier. Right now, Jinshan had placed all of his hopes on the purple and green sword chi. Success or failure depended on it. The purple and green sword chi was currently Jinshan's strongest attack. Seeing that Jinshan had actually taken the initiative to charge towards him, Shixiangran's eyes revealed a trace of excitement. With his barrier protecting him, even a king weapon would not be able to break through his defense, let alone Jinshan. Thus, Shixiangran disdained Jinshan's attack. At this moment, Shixiangran felt as if the pages of the Heaven Tier battle skill were already in his hands. Thinking up to this point, Shixiangran's grip on the seal of Baoshan tightened. When he got close to Jinshan, he directly used the seal of Baoshan as if it was a rock and fiercely smashed it towards Jinshan's head. When the light wind sword came into contact with the barrier around Shixiangran's body, Jinshan's eyes were filled with expectation as a small hole was melted into the barrier. Seeing this scene, Jinshan was ecstatic. Without any hesitation, the light wind sword pierced through Shixiangran's throat with lightning speed. Shixiangran's entire body stiffened as he abruptly stopped moving. He stared blankly at the light wind sword that had pierced through his throat. His face was filled with disbelief. The seal of Baoshan that he had been holding in his hand was also abruptly stopped in midair. This isn't possible. Shixiangran's eyes were wide open as he spat out a few words with great difficulty. He was unable to accept the scene in front of him. Dugufeng and Jitawukong, who had been attacking Jinshan at the same time, also came to a stop. Their eyes were filled with disbelief as they stared at the light wind sword that had pierced through Shixiangran's throat. Their faces were filled with shock. They had experienced firsthand just how strong a barrier was. Even a Heaven Saint Master would need to use their full strength to break through it. But at this moment, the barrier protecting Shixiangran had actually been easily pierced through by Jinshan's light wind sword. It had not even stopped him in the slightest. It was as weak as tofu. How could they not be shocked? On the other side, Qinji and Timuling were also shocked as they looked at this scene. Their hearts were in turmoil. Timuling covered her mouth as she stared at Jinshan and serene in a daze. At this time, the yellow-clothed girl also entered the cave and saw Xiangran's throat being pierced by the light wind sword. Her expression froze for a moment before her eyes widened in shock. Her face was filled with disbelief and disbelief. He actually broke through Xiangran's barrier. The yellow-clothed girl's heart surged like waves. At this moment, she did not know what she was feeling. Was it because of Xiangran's death, or was it because of Jinshin's sudden display of strength? Jinshin's eyes were filled with excitement as he looked at the light wind sword that had pierced through Xiangran's throat. Finally, a large stone was lifted from his heart. When the azure and violet sword spirits had just awakened, they had continuously displayed their strength. Jinshin had also relied on the azure and violet sword spirits to kill Earth Saint Masters with his strength as a great Saint Master. And now, the azure and violet sword spirits did not disappoint him. They were actually able to easily break through the barrier that even a king armament could not do anything to. As a result, the other people who were protected by the barrier were much less of a threat to him. Although a king armament was very powerful, it was at most a weapon that could unleash powerful attacks. As long as they didn't let the king armament hit them and didn't clash with the king armament head-on, the king armament would be no different from an ordinary saint armament in their hands. Xiangran's life force was rapidly draining away. He was still staring at this scene in a daze. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Without his support, the spirit formation around him was also rapidly fading away. In the end, it disappeared. With a twist of his wrist, Jinshin used the light wind sword to pierce through Xiangran's throat and pulled out the light wind sword. At the same time, Jinshin reached out to grab Xiangran's space ring and the seal of the treasure mountain from his right hand. He then continued to rush towards Jiedo Wukong, who was closest to him. Jinshin's previous actions had already made Jiedo Wukong, Dugu Feng, and Jinshin's enemies. Jinshin would definitely not let go of his enemies. Furthermore, they had the heaven tier battle skill that Jinshin coveted. Seeing Jinshin rushing towards him, Jiedo Wukong's expression changed greatly. Before the fight for the heaven tier battle skill, he did not put Jinshin in his eyes at all. However, seeing how Jinshin had easily destroyed his barrier and killed Xiangran had given him a huge shock. Now, he was not so naive as to think that no one would be able to hurt him with the barrier protecting him. Jiedo Wukong's figure rapidly retreated. At the same time, the 1-meter-long greatsword in his hand began to burn with a layer of raging flames as it slashed towards Jinshin with a powerful might. Jinshin wasn't stupid enough to go head-to-head with a king armament, so he dodged the king armament's attack with ease. The light wind sword was wrapped in a layer of purple and green sword chi, and it turned into a silver bolt of lightning as it pierced towards Jiedo Wukong. The barrier was unable to stop the light wind sword's advance and was silently pierced through. The light wind sword was like a hot knife through butter as it pierced towards Jiedo Wukong. Seeing that his barrier was unable to withstand a single blow, Jiedo Wukong's forehead began to sweat profusely. His face became pale as he quickly retreated and used his king weapon to block in front of him. Ding! The light wind sword pierced through the king weapon, but the sword chi was unable to do anything to it. The king weapon was too strong and was not something that the sword chi of the current stage could harm. At this time, the flames on the king weapon surged and a powerful force was reflected back at Jiedo Wukong. Jinshin groaned and uncontrollably retreated a few steps as the blood in his body began to boil. Jinshin was shocked. The king weapon was truly worthy of being a weapon left behind by a Saint King expert. Just the rebounding force was enough to cause him to be unable to withstand it. Go to hell. Jiedo Wukong took advantage of the time when Jinshin was retreating and quickly stabbed towards Jinshin with his king weapon. Jinshin's body was like a ghost as he nimbly dodged Jiedo Wukong's attacks. The light wind sword was accompanied by the sword chi of the purple and green sword chi as it continuously stabbed towards Jiedo Wukong. The sword chi was so dense that it was difficult to determine which one was the real one. Jiedo Wukong was forced into a panic by Jinshin's attack. He immediately retracted his king weapon and began to wave it in front of him in an attempt to find the real body of the light wind sword. Then, he would use the king weapon's strength to directly injure Jinshan. However, Jed Wukong was only able to hold on for a short while before his movements came to an abrupt halt. He didn't know when Jinshan had appeared behind Jed Wukong, but the light wind sword had broken through his barrier and pierced right through his throat, piercing right through. This time, everyone present was once again dumbfounded. They did not think that Jinshan, who had just killed Jida Wukong, would only need a few breaths of time to kill Jida Wukong, who was also protected by a barrier and wielding a king weapon. Dugu Feng's face became very ugly. He immediately stomped on the ground and shot out of the cave. He already knew that he had offended Jinshan. If he continued to stay, it would be hard to avoid a fierce battle. With Jinshan's strength, he did not have the confidence to win. Jinshan quickly took the king weapon from Jida Wukong's hand and stored it in his own interspatial ring. He then took the interspatial ring from Jida Wukong's hand and immediately chased after Dugu Feng. Dugu Feng had the heaven-tier battle skill in his possession. If he escaped, then it would be very difficult for Jinshan to complete the heaven-tier battle skill. Sensing Jinshan chasing after him, Dugu Feng immediately shouted, "Help me stop him!" Immediately, four middle-aged men stepped forward to block Jinshan's path. Each of them had a powerful aura, and the one in the lead was a middle-aged man wearing a purple robe. Jinshan's eyes flashed with a strong, killing intent. His speed did not decrease in the slightest, and his light wind sword carried a purple and green sword chi as it attacked the four middle-aged men. The four of them did not know the power of the purple and green sword chi, so they all took out their saint weapons to block. Ding, 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 ding. Following the sound of the four weapons colliding, the light wind sword had already collided with the four saint weapons. The four saint weapons were immediately cut open by the purple and green sword chi. With the saint weapons damaged, the four middle-aged men were also implicated. They groaned one after another, and their faces immediately became somewhat pale. "While you're sick, I'll take your life." Jinshan was anxious for Dugu Feng to escape, so he directly attacked with all his strength. His strength as a first cycle Earth Saint Master was displayed to the extreme. In a flash of silver light, the light wind sword stabbed out 4 times. The 3 of them were unable to dodge in time, and their throats were pierced. Only the strongest of the 4, the purple-robed middle-aged man, was able to use his weapon to block Jinshan's attack. Immediately, another hole appeared on his greatsword. After his saint weapon was damaged twice, the middle-aged man's mouth began to bleed. He looked at Jinshan with eyes filled with shock.